Chapter 342. Qin Yining had experienced a lot since she came to the capital. Although no one neglected her when she was in Pang Zhao's residence, and she had Xian Yun and Lian Xiaozhou by her side, her financial lifeline was out of her control. She did not doubt Master Zhong at all. But after all, the mountain was high and the road was long, and she was powerless. Now that Master Zhong was by her side, she had the confidence to do whatever she wanted. Moreover, they had not seen each other for a long time. Now that she saw this old man who was loyal to her again, how could Qin Yining not be happy in her heart? It's a long story along the way. I'll tell you slowly in the future. Qin Yining looked at the two people behind Master Zhong and could not help but smile. Miss Zhou, Brother Lu, you're here too. Lu Jiu, and Lu Dahan were the refugees that Qin Yining took in Ning Garden. Benefactor. When Lu Dahan and Lu Jiu, saw that Qin Yining remembered their names, they could not help but be excited and bowed their heads. Qin Yining hurriedly helped them up and said with a smile, "What are you doing? Get up quickly." When they were taking refuge in Ning Garden, they had suffered together. Those refugees were grateful to Qin Yining for saving their lives. Lu Dahan and Lu Jiu, were more influential among them, so they had more contact with Qin Yining. Naturally, they were closer to him. Lu Jiu, stood up and said with a smile, "Benefactor, Master Zhong and his family said that they want to come to you for shelter. The two of us discussed it and came together. We are not very capable, but we are definitely loyal to you. If you have any orders, just tell us. Don't stand on ceremony with us." Lu Dahan also nodded with a simple and honest smile. Qin Yining said with a smile, "That's good. I'm in need of manpower here. I can rest assured with your help. By the way, why didn't Mr. and I come with you?" When they saw that Qin Yining still remembered Scholar and I, they couldn't help but laugh. Lu Dahan said, "Scholar and I is getting on in years. He said that his old bones couldn't withstand the torment, so he didn't come with us to pledge his loyalty to the benefactor." Master Zhong followed the benefactor's instructions and arranged work for all of us in Ning Garden. Now we all have land to farm, houses to live in, and food to eat. The head shopkeeper cherished the old and pitied the poor, so he found a place in the manor to settle Scholar and I and the other lonely old people down. Scholar and I then began to take care of the orphans in his own little courtyard. He taught the children how to read. With the help of our benefactor, they are all doing well. That's good, that's good. Qin Yining laughed heartily. One who survives a great disaster is bound to have good fortune in the future. We still have a long way to go. Lu Jiu smiled and said, "It's our fortune to be able to follow our benefactor." Qin Yining looked at Master Zhong with a smile and said, "This isn't the place to talk. I'll tidy up a bit. Let's go out and find a restaurant to eat. We can talk in detail while we're at it." "Yes." Master Zhong, Lu Dahan, and Lu Jiu all respectfully said yes. Qin Yining then went back to change his clothes. How big could the guest house be? The commotion here immediately alarmed the Dowager Duchess. When she heard that Qin Yining's capable head shopkeeper from Dian had come, the Dowager Duchess's eyes lit up. Hurry, hurry, hurry up and call fourth girl over." When Mammy Qin heard this, she had no choice but to go personally. Qin Yining had just finished changing his clothes when he saw Mammy Qin arrive. He immediately understood and went forward to greet her with a smile. "Mammy Qin is here. Does the Dowager Duchess have any instructions for me?" Mammy Qin looked a little embarrassed and sighed. The Dowager Duchess heard that fourth young lady's former head shopkeeper had come, so she instructed this old servant to invite fourth young lady over for a chat. As for what the Dowager Duchess wanted to say to Qin Yining, it was already obvious. The family Qin's belongings had been lost in the plunder, and second master was waiting for the emperor to arrange an official position for him. Third master's businesses were all in Dian, so they couldn't get in touch with him for the time being. The womenfolk all had to do needlework to supplement the family's income. At this time, third master's head shopkeeper hadn't come, but Qin Yining's head shopkeeper had come first. Wasn't he here to deliver living expenses to the family? Qin Yining smiled slightly. Since that's the case, I'll go and see the Dowager Duchess first. Mammy Qin secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She was afraid that Qin Yining would act stubbornly because he couldn't stand the Dowager Duchess's way of doing things. Now that the family was already in chaos, they couldn't afford to cause more trouble. Not to mention that her own life wasn't going well. If she caused more trouble, wouldn't the Li family and Gu family, who were next door, be watching the show? These days, whenever the Dowager Duchess saw Qin Yining, she would feel suffocated. Today, however, she craned her neck in anticipation. Qin Yining had just lifted the curtain and entered when the Dowager Duchess impatiently asked, "Sister Yi, is the head shopkeeper of your business here?" Qin Yining came forward and curtsied. He then smiled bitterly and said, "Dowager Duchess must be joking. How could I have any business now?" The Dowager Duchess was immediately stunned. Qin Yining said in a low voice, "Dian has already perished, so there's no Zhao Yun agency anymore. The Zhao Yun agency's original income has already been confiscated by the officials sent by Dezhou. The inns, restaurants, and real estate have also been taken over." "What?" The Dowager Duchess angrily roared in shock. "Are you trying to coax me, this old woman? If they didn't come with their business, why would they come to see you? In any case, you're also the daughter of a family. Don't you want to care about the life and death of your family? We're now living under someone else's roof and almost don't have enough food to eat. You actually became stingy. Truly, girls favor outsiders. We've raised you for 15 years in vain." Under the Dowager Duchess's rage, she really didn't choose her words carefully. Second Furen, Han's second young mistress, and boss Xiaojia on the side all looked very embarrassed. They all wanted to say how long had it been since Qin Yining returned to the Fu. In the first 14 years, he didn't have a family to support him. After coming back for a year, he also suffered a lot. He was the most unlucky one. Qin Yining didn't get angry. He only sighed and said, "Dowager Duchess, please calm down. Why should I coax you? How much have I sacrificed for this family? Has Dowager Duchess forgotten?" The Dowager Duchess thought about the past. She thought about how Qin Yining was sent to the peace talks and then sent to the palace. Later, he was forced to cultivate in seclusion. He even almost entered the palace when he arrived in Dezhou. After all these things, he had contributed a lot to the family. The Dowager Duchess couldn't be so righteous. Qin Yining continued, "The Dian dynasty has fallen. Even the national treasury and the internal funds of the county king of Yan have now gone to Dezhou. Zhao Yun Agency is the business that the former imperial family gave to my maternal grandfather's family. It's recorded in the internal accounts of the Yan dynasty's imperial family. How could Master Zhong refute this?" The officials of Dezhou reached out to take over. Master Zhong could only hand over his power and account. Otherwise, it would be considered treason. Although that's the case, you've been in business for so long. Didn't you save some personal funds? Personal funds? Your granddaughter does have some personal funds. But when she came, she was robbed. When she hurriedly escaped, she lost her belongings. Didn't Dowager Duchess pick up her belongings from your granddaughter's carriage at that time? The Dowager Duchess frowned. "Do you think I would covet your belongings? The personal funds I'm talking about are the money in your accounts. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and chuckled. Your granddaughter understands Dowager Duchess's meaning. Your granddaughter also knows that the family's current situation is tense. However, the officials of Dizhou who were sent out aren't fools. When they handed over the accounts, they took away all the money. Master Zhong isn't your granddaughter's servant. He's just a shopkeeper that your granddaughter hired. Now that Zhaoyun agency is gone, Master Zhong and your granddaughter no longer have a master-servant relationship. How much money your family has nothing to do with your granddaughter. Qin Yining's words were all reasonable. The Dowager Duchess really couldn't find any words to refute them. The Dowager Duchess didn't believe that Qin Yining didn't have any personal funds. However, she was still the Dowager Duchess. With her status, she couldn't search her granddaughter's body, right? Moreover, if she really searched Qin Yining, did other people have to search her as well? The Dowager Duchess waved her hand in irritation. Since you don't have anything to do with Master Zhong, why do you still want to see him? Qin Yining felt that the Dowager Duchess might have fainted from anger. Otherwise, how could she say such words that were full of loopholes and could be used against her? Is Dowager Duchess joking? Even if we don't have a master-servant relationship, we still know each other. Now that we're in Dizhou, we're considered fellow countrymen. It's right to go and see each other. Father often taught me how to conduct myself. Your granddaughter has never dared to forget this point. She curtsied and said, your granddaughter still has to entertain the guests. I won't disturb your rest. Qin Yining courteously bowed to Second Foreign, Han's second young mistress, and the others before leaving the Dowager Duchess's room. The Dowager Duchess's face alternated between green and red. Thinking that such a large sum of money no longer belonged to the family Qin because of the destruction of the Dian dynasty, she felt a burst of anger in her heart. When the money was needed, one would regret not having enough. Now, the family Qin was struggling to make ends meet. Her eldest son's whereabouts were unknown. They were living in the guest house and were being controlled everywhere. In the capital, they didn't even have their own home. How could the Dowager Duchess's heart not be anxious? Second Foreign and Han's second young mistress looked at each other and slipped out of the room while sticking close to the wall. Only Mammy Qin, Qin Huining, and eighth young miss were left in the room to serve. For a moment, the atmosphere was so oppressive that it seemed to solidify. Qin Yining handed over Lian Xiaozhou to Xian Yun and Qiu Lu to take care of. Then, he took Bing Tang and Ji Yun and left the guest house with Master Zhong and the others. Because he wasn't familiar with any place in the capital, Master Zhong simply said, if boss doesn't mind, why don't you come to the small courtyard that I rented? My wife, son, and daughter-in-law are all there. It'll be convenient for us to eat and talk at home. That's naturally good. I'm just afraid that I'll trouble Madam, my brothers, and my sisters-in-law. What are you talking about? Since boss is willing to come, that's their dignity. Master Zhong was very pleased with how Qin Yining addressed his family members. Qin Yining followed him to the courtyard that was allocated to him at the west side of the city. We just arrived in the capital and haven't established ourselves yet. So, we arranged for someone to come to the capital and rent this place. We thought that once our family members arrived, we would be able to settle down. Standing in front of the mottled black courtyard door, Master Zhong smiled and explained to Qin Yining. Qin Yining smiled and nodded. The head shopkeeper has always been meticulous in his work. The group of people chatted and laughed as they entered the door. Qin Yining first went to greet the womenfolk of the Zhong family. He gave Madame Zhong and the grandmother a thorough etiquette before going to the study to speak with Master Zhong. Chapter 343. There's actually this much. Qin Yining said in surprise, I remember that even though we spent quite a bit of money back then, this amount of money is truly unexpected. That's right. When we bought the land, the price wasn't even 30% of what it was normally. No one would have thought that when Dezhou took over the Dian, it would be so peaceful. There was no burning, killing, looting, or massacring of the cities that everyone was afraid of. We met Prince Zhongshuan and were only able to analyze the situation afterwards. However, the commoners didn't know about it. At this point, Master Zhong couldn't help but laugh. Not only did we make a fortune from the land, but we also sold the shops that we mortgaged to Wang Yi. Wang Yi must have also made a fortune. When Qin Yining heard this, she nodded thoughtfully. Right now, she felt a bit guilty. She felt that she had made a fortune from the country's disaster and was being too unkind to the commoners. When Master Zhong saw Qin Yining's expression, he could guess what she was thinking. He couldn't help but sigh, "Boss, you're too kind." At that time, everyone was starving, and the tragedy of the country being destroyed was right in front of us. Wasn't your original intention in buying the land so that the commoners could have some money to escape? Although that's the case, their land was sold cheaply. I always feel like I took advantage of them. That's not right. It wasn't that boss forced them to sell their land. It was that they willingly sold it at a low price in order to escape. In that situation, if boss didn't buy their land, they wouldn't have made a single cent. They would have abandoned their land and fled. After Dezhou took over, the ownerless land would have been confiscated. Then, when they returned to their hometowns, where would they find land to farm? With the land in our hands, we could even hire them and give them a job. Qin Yining blinked. She couldn't help but admit that Master Zhong was right. Master Zhong continued, "Right now, most of the commoners who haven't starved to death have returned to the capital. Those who don't have houses and land don't have a livelihood. I made the decision to hire many commoners to farm for us. It can be considered as giving them a way out." Qin Yining sighed. Then, he smiled and said, "It's all in the past. It's useless to think about it now. Why don't we only take 70% of the rent this year and leave 30% for them so that everyone can rest and recuperate?" Shopkeeper Zhong said in astonishment, "Boss, 30% for each household is not a small sum when added together." "I know." Qin Yining sighed and said, "There's no end to the money in the world. No matter how much money I want, it's just a number in my hands. This 30% rent for each household is not enough to shake my foundation, but for everyone else, it can lessen a lot of the burden. I used to be a Dian, so I can do something for the people." Master Zhong looked at Qin Yining. After a long time, he said, "This old man admires boss's righteousness." As he said this, he stood up and bowed to Qin Yining. "You're too kind. No matter what I do, you'll have to put in some effort." Qin Yining stood up and returned the greeting. He said, "Actually, I have another place in the capital that needs money." "Boss, please speak." Master Zhong sat upright. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Head shopkeeper must have heard some of the things that happened on our way here. My family's old madam and the others lost all the money they brought. Although my third uncle is a businessman, the road to the bottom of the mountain is long. Moreover, the profits from his business aren't that great. Therefore, I want to buy a residence in private and live with someone who doesn't seem to have anything to do with me. When my father returns to the capital, I'll sell it. This way, my family won't have no place to live. I've already asked Wang Yi to help me find a few places to live. However, too many things have happened recently, so I haven't had the time to choose one. Boss, don't worry. I'll help you with this matter." Master Zhong was silent for a moment before saying, "There's a rumor going around that you and Wang Yi, don't worry. Wang Yi and I are still the same as before. There are some things that we have no choice but to do. In the future, you can trust Wang Yi." Master Zhong's worried heart finally relaxed. He let out a long sigh and said, "That's good, that's good." He watched with his own eyes as Qin Yining and Pang Xiao gradually got together. This pair of young people was truly a loving match. If they had to separate because of some real reason, that would be too sad. The two of them chatted for a while before a servant came to inform them that the meal had been prepared. Qin Yining ate the meal with the Zhong family, Lu Dehan, and Lu Jiu. After the meal, they chatted for a while. He told Master Zhong that he could go to the Wang Fu to find Xiaoyu or Su Weiji and ask them to pass on a message to Pang Shao. Only then did he return to the guest house. The next day, Master Zhong went to the Wang Fu. Pang Shao introduced Xiaoyu and Su Weiji to Master Zhong. This is head shopkeeper Zhong Yuqing. He's Sister Yi's man. Xiaoyu and Su Weiji bowed politely to Master Zhong. Their attitudes were extremely cautious. Master Zhong learned from Qin Yining that these two were Pang Zhao's most trusted advisors. Looking at their attitude towards her, she knew that Qin Yining's position in their hearts wasn't low. Master Zhong also politely returned the greeting. A few days later, Master Zhong and Xiaoyu went out to look at houses. Among the 3 houses, they chose a 2-sectioned house in the east of the city. They bought the house and put it under Lu Dehan's name. Qin Yining used the excuse of buying silk thread to take a look at the house. He felt that the location of the house was not bad and that it could be moved in after some repairs. He asked the craftsmen to tidy up the house first. They would tidy up the house when spring came. As time went by, there was still no news from Qin Huayuan, the Sun clan, or Chao Yuqing. Qin Yining was getting more and more anxious. She messed up the selection. She didn't know if the person who kidnapped her father would do anything to harm her father. As for the 5 groups of Dian officials who surrendered, they had already safely arrived in the capital. The guest house and the surrounding houses were filled with the families of the surrendered officials of the Yan dynasty. It was truly overcrowded. However, Li Qitian only asked the people from the Ministry of Rights to treat these people well. If they wanted to buy a house, they could do so. If they didn't want to buy a house and didn't mind the small space, they could also squeeze into the guest house. Of course, if they didn't lack money, they could also look for an inn. With so many people in the capital, the business of the restaurants and inns improved. However, Li Qitian didn't immediately reward them with official positions. Everyone stared blankly as they waited. After the little new year, Qin Yining was too worried about Qin Huayuan. Her mouth was full of blisters and sores, and even drinking water hurt. In the middle of the night, Pang Shao climbed over the window to see Qin Yining when no one was around. He saw her holding her chin and staring blankly at the silk lamp. Her face, which had become a little chubby, was now so thin that her chin was sharp. He couldn't help but feel sorry for her. He said, "What happened? Haven't you eaten these past few days?" Qin Yining was startled by the sudden voice. She raised her eyes and glared at him. She took off the lampshade and blew out the lamp so that no one outside could see the figure in the room. Then, she said in a low voice, "I haven't eaten these past few days. I'm always worried about my father and mother. Yesterday, I had a nightmare. I dreamed that they were killed by kidnappers. I was so scared that I woke up. After that, I couldn't sleep anymore." Chapter 344. On Purpose. Qin Yining looked at Pang Shao in shock. She shook her head and said, "I don't understand. Why didn't my father come back on purpose? Does he not want to care about the situation in the capital?" As soon as she said that, Qin Yining immediately shook her head and denied her own thoughts. "No, my father is a very responsible person. He would not do such an irresponsible thing. He would never leave his family and run away." Pang Shao had seen her calm and intelligent side many times. It seemed that no matter what happened, she would be able to solve it calmly. Sometimes she was so intelligent that he felt that his presence did not help at all. Now, seeing her at a loss, he felt that it was very novel. He also felt that the way she frowned and muttered to herself was very cute. He stretched out his long arm and hugged her. He said with a smile, "You're thinking too much. Actually, it's very simple. You just came to the capital and don't know much about Dezhou. You'll understand once I tell you." As he spoke, he picked up Qin Yining's teacup and took a sip of tea. Qin Yining did not mind his heavy arm on her shoulder, nor did she mind that he drank her tea. She looked at him with sparkling eyes. Pang Shao was dazzled by her watery eyes. He almost could not hold himself back from kissing her. He swallowed his saliva with difficulty. Seeing that he did not speak for a long time, Qin Yining pushed him. "Tell me quickly." Pang Shao was amused by her appearance and laughed out loud. He put his arm around her shoulder and said, "Okay, I'll tell you now. Actually, it's very simple. Dezhou has its own rules. I think that's what my father-in-law was waiting for." Qin Yining asked in confusion, "What's this inspection you mentioned?" "Your Majesty made a slight change according to the old customs of Beiji and set up a new rule for the examination of officials. All officials below the second rank in the capital who are not in the cabinet will have to go through an examination every 3 years. When Qin Yining heard this, he nodded slowly and said thoughtfully, "How exactly did the investigation work? Tell me in detail." Pang Shao said, "There are 2 stages to the performance evaluation. In the first stage, the reference official has to submit a report. In the report, he cannot boast about his achievements. Instead, he has to look back on his shortcomings in the past 3 years, what he did wrong, what mistakes he made, etc. There must be no concealment or lying. After the report has been submitted, the Ministry of Personnel will conduct a unified examination. The report submitted in the first stage will be the main evidence for the examination. So, this year's inspection is about to begin." Pang Shao smiled and said, "To be exact, it's a new year." Before the new year, the Yamen was sealed. After the new year, this matter will begin. Qin Yining pondered for a moment, and his brows gradually relaxed. He let out a long sigh and said, "In that case, my father should be back after the new year, when the first phase of the inspection is over, and the officials have handed in their reports." "Smart." Pang Shao scratched the bridge of her nose. Qin Huayuan was the leader of the Dain's surrendered officials. In addition, the hatred between him and Pang Shao for killing his father could be used by Li Qitian. Therefore, when he returned to the capital, he would definitely be put in an important position. Dain surrendered officials came to Dezhou's capital on the Dain to inject new blood into the Zhou dynasty's imperial court. If he returned early, Your Majesty would have no choice but to start rewarding him based on his merits for the sake of his reputation. However, the imperial court had always been filled with people. Without good positions, the Yan dynasty's surrendered officials would have more positions. As long as Qin Huayuan did not return, Li Qitian would not be able to start rewarding him based on his merits. He stayed outside to wait for the inspection to begin. After the first stage of the examination, a large group of officials submitted their reports, stating their mistakes when they were officials. In this way, Li Qitian would have a target if he wanted to find a position for the Yan dynasty's surrendered officials. Qin Yining believed that Li Qitian would definitely put the surrendered officials of the Yan dynasty in important positions because of the current structure of the imperial court in Dezhou. The former officials of Beiji occupied most of the positions of the civil officials. Although Li Qitian's loyal nobles had military power, they could not compete with the civil officials. When the surrendered subjects of Great Yan dynasty came to Great Zhou, as they had lost their foundation, the only person they could rely on was Li Qitian, and their only option was to pledge their loyalty to Li Qitian. Presumably, Li Qitian also wanted to give the surrendered Dian officials higher positions. Qin Huayuan's disappearance gave Li Qitian a reason to temporarily not reward him and wait for a vacancy. Really? Qin Yining shook his head and smiled bitterly. I was worried for nothing. Why didn't you tell me when you knew the inspection was about to begin? I forgot to tell you. Pang Xiao smiled. Can you rest assured now? Qin Yining nodded and said, I already felt suspicious when there was no news for so long. Even if something really happened, with my father's personality, he would definitely send a message to us. Now it seems that my father has made up his mind that I will know about the inspection and analyze when he will return. That's right. That's why it's a blessing for a father-in-law to have a smart daughter. Qin Yining blushed from his indirect praise and smiled. Why do you sound like you're smeared with honey? You're so good at coaxing people today. When have I ever not been a sweet talker? Why don't you try it? As he spoke, he deliberately moved closer to her. Qin Yining shyly pushed him away. You're not serious. Stop fooling around. Pang Xiao couldn't help but chuckle. He raised his hands in surrender. Okay. I won't fool around. Let's wait quietly for a while. During the new year, I'm afraid your majesty will have a lot of brotherly affection. In addition, your majesty went through untold hardships to find my mother. I won't be able to come and see you often. Qin Yining was shocked when she heard this. She sat up straight and asked, What mother? Pang Xiao's eyes were somewhat cold. His tone was full of sarcasm. What mother? Of course it's my father's legal wife. My mother was just a maidservant. She had me by accident. After knowing that my mother was pregnant, Madame Pang drove my mother away. She even tried to kill her on the way. Fortunately, my mother was smart and avoided her. Madame Pang should have died together with her. Who knew that your majesty would find this person for me? Now that the Pang family has been defeated and their only mother has been found, your majesty said that the Pang family has a little more hope. It can be said that the Pang family has a complete family. He told me to be filial to my mother. Do you want to take that mother back to the prince's mansion? What about Madame Dowager? If I really take her back, my mother was a maidservant of the Pang family. She wasn't even a concubine. Naturally, she is still a maidservant now. Pang Xiao's lips raised a sneer. Qin Yining shook his head and said, It's not appropriate. We can't let old master, Madame Dowager and Madame Dowager be bullied. In my opinion, it's still uncertain whether this mother is real or not. It's better to lock her up and investigate her slowly. It's not good to contradict your majesty face to face. However, it's easy for you to treat her in any way you want. Chapter 345. Qin Yining knew how much sadness he had under the surface. Hearing him belittle himself like this, she couldn't help but hold his hand with heartache. Since ancient times, heroes don't ask where they come from. Your wealth and honor were obtained by risking your life. You used those scars and military exploits to exchange. You don't need to inherit the Pang family's wealth and honor. You are the first generation of nobles who have made great achievements. I believe that if General Pang knew of your existence, he would be proud of you. Her voice was gentle, but her tone was unprecedentedly firm. Pang Xiao felt warm when he heard this. But he was also a mortal after all. He also had times when his heart was weak. Pang Xiao couldn't help but open up his thoughts to Qin Yining. Even so, I am an illegitimate child. When the official mother comes, the inner residence will be in chaos. I am also worried that my mother, grandfather, and grandmother won't be able to do anything to her. Even if the official mother appears now, so what? She is the wife of the general's mansion, and you are Wang Yi of the Prince Zhongshuan's mansion. The general's mansion doesn't exist anymore, but the Prince Zhongshuan's mansion is in its heyday. How you want to treat her, isn't it up to you? It doesn't matter if you are afraid that she will bully the old madam and the others. Just give her a courtyard so that she won't have to worry about food and drink. Don't tell me that His Majesty would ask you to place her in the first place. I think Your Majesty means this. Pang Shao smiled bitterly and said, the general's mansion never knew of my existence before, and I wasn't recorded in the genealogy of the Pang family. If it weren't for the Pang family's banner, Your Majesty wouldn't have sent Mr. Zheng to find me. My mother also made up her mind to not tell me about my background for the rest of my life. She only wanted me to live a happy life without worrying about food and clothing. Qin Yining was very angry when he heard this. He couldn't help but say, Your Majesty is a man. How can you reach your hands into the inner residence again and again? Are you a man or not? Let's not talk about the 10 beauties in the house. Just how much did Li Qitian add fuel to the fire behind the Anyang royal princess? In addition, whenever Pang Shao went to war, he would often invite the Yao clan, Yao Qinggu, and Ma clan to stay in the palace for a while. On the surface, it seemed like he was helping his brothers to be filial to their elders, but in reality, he was simply holding a hostage by his side. If Li Qitian was truly capable of scheming and overt schemes, Qin Yining would truly admire him. However, Li Qitian's actions left Qin Yining with a bad impression. That doesn't matter. As long as we remain vigilant at all times, we'll deal with whatever comes our way. As for who was the one who let down who and who was wronged, that's the matter of the previous generation. General Feng is no longer here, so it's meaningless to fuss over these things. The most important thing is to live well in the future. When Pang Shao heard this, he nodded slightly and tightened his grip on Qin Yining's arm. The two of them quietly leaned against each other and whispered to each other. After a while, Pang Shao quietly left. In the following time, the entire capital was immersed in the joyous atmosphere of the approaching new year. For the Dezhou dynasty, the world was at peace and the country was at peace. The Taitan was busy with internal strife and had no time to disturb them. The north had been peaceful for a long time. Most of Dian had been merged into Dezhou's territory, and the south had also been pacified. This year's Dezhou dynasty was filled with good things. Li Qitian was also flushed with success and was in high spirits. However, for the Dian dynasty's people, this year was the most difficult one to endure. This was because this was their first new year after the fall of their country. From now on, they would no longer have any foundation. Just like how they were living in the guest house now, even if they became officials in the future and bought a house, they would still be floating duckweed in Dezhou. On New Year's Eve, the family Qin dynasty's people had originally discussed whether or not they should celebrate New Year's with the county king of Yan, his wife, Lord Li, and Lord Gu. However, after careful analysis, the Yuqi Yan would probably be a sparrow trapped in a golden cage in Dezhou. They would never be able to fly again. Even if Li Qitian was drunk, he would not give the Yuqi Yan any real power or official position. Not only did this person have no future, but if they were too close to him, they might even bring disaster to their own family. As such, the entire guest house was deathly silent. Only the occasional sound of firecrackers could be heard from the streets outside. The family Qin dynasty's people gathered in the main room of the small courtyard for New Year's Eve dinner. There was a dazzling array of delicacies on the table. With Li Qitian, the benevolent ruler, taking special care of the surrendered subjects, the chef had put in a lot of effort to prepare the New Year's Eve dishes. Although he was not in the mood to specially prepare southern delicacies for the Dian people, the dishes were still delicious. However, the whole family did not have much of an appetite. Because of the so-called reunion dinner, the whole family did not reunite. The Dowager Duchess looked at the whole family sitting together in a circle and sighed. Last year on New Year's Eve, who would have thought that we would be celebrating New Year's like this year? The second madam held the Dowager Duchess's arm and patted it comfortingly. Dowager Duchess, take care of yourself. Don't think about these unhappy things. How can I be happy? I don't know if Brother Meng is doing well or if he's still alive. Our family managed to escape natural disasters and man-made disasters and arrived at the Great Zhou dynasty. We thought that our future would be smooth and safe, but Brother Meng was kidnapped and taken away. We want to agree to the kidnapper's conditions, but Sister Yi can't enter the palace. As the Dowager Duchess spoke, sorrow welled up in her heart. She covered her face and sobbed. When the whole family saw this, they all showed grief. 8th young Miss and Qin Huining also shed tears. Qin Yining frowned and said, "Don't cry, Dowager Duchess. Today is New Year's Eve, a joyous day. We can't cry. You heartless little wench. I don't even know how your parents are now, and you won't allow me to cry. I think you are simply cold-hearted and not willing to worry about your parents." The Dowager Duchess slammed the table and sobbed. Why is my life so bitter? How did I get involved in this kind of thing? The Dowager Duchess's crying became louder and louder, causing the second madam, Han's second young mistress, and the group of maidservants to also cry. Qin Yining frowned and looked at second old master and third old master. He said, "Second uncle, third uncle, crying so loudly at this time, aren't you afraid of offending your majesty? How many pairs of eyes are staring at our family? Those who know, it's because the Dowager Duchess is worried about her son, that's why she's crying. Those who don't know will think that we're die-hard loyalists of the Yan dynasty, crying for the fall of the country on New Year's Eve. In the future, our family won't be able to live in the Zhou dynasty." Although Qin Yining's words were directed at second old master, his voice wasn't soft. It was equivalent to indirectly reprimanding all the womenfolk in the room. When the Dowager Duchess heard that she would offend the imperial family, her crying became softer. The rest of the womenfolk also felt anxious and didn't dare to cry loudly. Second old master was also very impatient with the Dowager Duchess's behavior. He even admired how Qin Huayuan could coax the Dowager Duchess to be well-behaved with just a few words. Second old master said, "Sister Yi is right. We have to pay more attention to our words and actions now. Moreover, Sister Yi just secretly told me that she has good news to tell the family today." The Dowager Duchess wiped her tears and looked at Qin Yining unhappily. "What good news do you have to say?" Chapter 346. Are you serious? When the old madam heard this, she stood up excitedly and grabbed Qin Yining's hand. She asked, "Did your father write a letter?" Without waiting for Qin Yining to reply, the old madam anxiously said, "He's really heartless. Why didn't he write a letter to me? He didn't even tell me that he was safe. Could it be that he doesn't care about me, his mother?" The old madam's tears gushed out again. Mammy Qin hurriedly took a handkerchief to wipe the old madam's tears. Qin Yining looked helplessly at second old master, then looked away. Second old master knew that it would be bad if he didn't speak now, so he said, "Mother, what are you saying? You know eldest brother's temper the best. If he really wrote a letter, how could he not send his regards to you first?" "No letter." The old madam was stunned and forgot to cry. She said in surprise, "Could it be that Sister Yi heard about it from somewhere else? Is your father doing well? Where is he? I also don't know where my father is, but I believe that with his wisdom, he's definitely doing well." "What do you mean? What's going on?" Seeing that the old madam was anxious and was about to cry again, Qin Yining hurriedly told her about Jing Cha. Seeing that the womenfolk still didn't understand, she looked to second old master for help. Qin Huayuan wasn't at home, and second old master was the backbone of the family, so his words were more convincing. Therefore, after hearing second old master's analysis, the entire family was delighted. Are you serious? The old madam's eyes were bright, and she pointed at second old master with a smile on her face. Second old master smiled bitterly and said, "Of course I'm serious. How could this son deceive you? Good, good. This new year, there's finally something to be happy about." The old madam's tears turned into laughter. She was finally in a good mood and let out a long sigh. The atmosphere immediately eased. The old madam really loved Qin Huayuan to the bone. The others felt that Qin Huayuan was the backbone of the family when he was at home. Second master felt a little sour in his heart. Logically speaking, during this period of time, he had been busy at home, and the family was used to looking for him to make decisions, whether big or small. He could be considered to have done his best. Who would have thought that just the news of Qin Huayuan's imminent return would be more exciting than having someone enlighten him in front of him? However, on second thought, Qin Huayuan was coming back. He also felt that his heart was clear and at ease. His eldest brother was upright and had both talent and integrity. He did not favor anyone in the family, nor did he suppress anyone. If anyone was in trouble, he would help them. With such a good elder brother by his side, second master also felt at ease. Just as the Qin family was having a happy and harmonious time, Yu Yen, who lived next to them, was standing in the empty courtyard with a black sable collar cloak draped over her shoulders, looking up at the bright fireworks in the night sky. The sparkling and translucent snow sprinkled down, forming a faint layer of sparkling and translucent snow on his shoulders. The specks of white snow on the black fur collar were like the frost on his temples. He was a young man who was not yet 25 years old, but his black hair had already turned white. The wrinkles between his eyebrows had deepened, like a dead knot that could not be untied. A paper umbrella covered his head, blocking the light snow for him, but also blocking his line of sight. He turned his head and saw Li Yanyan, wearing a white fox fur coat, looking at him with a smile. Beside her was Gu Chang, wearing a light pink satin coat. "Royal Prince, the courtyard is cold, please go back. Catching a cold is not a joke." Li Yanyan's voice was gentle and slow, very much like the person who also liked to wear a white fox fur coat. Gu Chang also said, "You didn't eat much for dinner. In any case, you should eat more." Yu Yen shook his head and pushed aside Li Yanyan's paper umbrella, still looking up at the sky. The fireworks had already disappeared. Only a few faint traces of smoke could be seen in his pitch-black eyes. He wanted to see the fireworks, but he didn't enjoy it to his heart's content. It was as if his fate was always not right. There were all kinds of reasons that made him not right, but what could he do? Right now, he was only a royal prince, and it was impossible for him to have any real power or freedom for the rest of his life. If he wanted to live, then he had to be obedient under Li Qitian's eyes. He couldn't overstep his boundaries, and he couldn't let Li Qitian have any suspicions. For the rest of his life, he could only be a sparrow in a cage. Once the master got tired of him, what awaited him would definitely not be freedom. Yu Yen looked up at the sky in a daze. The silver strands mixed in his black hair were especially obvious under the light of the lanterns. Li Yanyan's heart ached so much that her nose turned sour, and she almost cried. No matter what wrong her father had done to the imperial family, now that Dian had perished, everything had become a thing of the past. She had made up her mind to accompany Yu Yen for the rest of her life. They only wanted to be a married couple. It was enough that she could serve him like a wife of an ordinary family, give birth to children for him, and take care of the inner residence. As for the other concubines, they had all died on the way here. The only one left, Gu Chang, had also been reduced from an imperial concubine to a concubine. Even if she gave birth, the child she gave birth to would be a concubine. So what if she didn't become the empress? She was satisfied with this kind of peaceful life. After experiencing so many life and death situations, Li Yanyan felt that she could accept it. As long as her husband was fine, and her maternal family, Duke Ongwa's residence, was also fine, what else could she ask for? Your Highness, don't be sad. When everything settles down, we can live a good life, have children, and live a peaceful life. Isn't that good? Li Yanyan persuaded with a smile. Gu Chang also said, yes, I heard that 4th Miss Qin's reputation outside was ruined by Prince Zhongshuan. Prince Zhongshuan forcibly took her away and raped her. Miss Qin is also pitiful. When your Highness settles down, you can go to their family and ask them to bring her over as a concubine. You don't dislike her and give her a way out. I think the family Qin won't object. In the future, we sisters can have more companions. Gu Chang was bright and moving. When she smiled, she was very likable. Her words were reasonable, and Yu Qiyan's originally dark heart seemed to have a few rays of light. Li Yanyan frowned and looked at Gu Chang with gritted teeth, but she didn't dare to show her emotions. Whether it was the empress or an ordinary legal wife, she could only nod her head if her husband wanted to take a concubine. Otherwise, she would be jealous. Gu Chang raised her eyebrows proudly. Anyway, she had changed from an imperial concubine to a concubine. What else could she lose? Yu Qiyan had always been indifferent to her. Instead of letting Li Yanyan be proud, it was better to make Qin Yining. At that time, everyone would have a hard time. Yu Qiyan said lightly, let's go back. Then he turned and went back to his room first. Li Yanyan and Gu Chang looked at each other and gave each other a contemptuous smile. Then they followed him in. New Year's Eve passed, and all families lived in peace. On the first day of the new year, Huzi quietly came to give Qin Yining 3 big red envelopes, saying that they were from Madame Dowager, Old Master, and Old Madam. Qin Yining asked about Pang Zhao's legal mother, Madame Zong. Huzi only smiled and said that there was nothing wrong with it. On the 5th day of the new year, the Yamen opened its seal, and the investigation began in full swing. On the 15th day of the new year, the weather was fine. Qin Yining was teaching Lian Xiaozhou how to read. Suddenly, there was a shout in the yard. He's back. Master Ho is back. Master Ho is back. Qin Yining suddenly stood up and almost knocked the blue and white porcelain brush on the table to the ground. He lifted his legs and ran out. As soon as he arrived at the yard, he saw Qin Huayuan, who was wearing a gray fur cloak, leading the way into the yard. Chapter 347. Qin Huayuan had lost a lot of weight, and his sunken cheeks could be seen on his bearded face. However, the aura around him was steadier and sharper than before. Even if he had a smile on his face, the sharpness in his eyes couldn't be ignored. Qin Yining knew that his father must have experienced a lot of things while he was away. Seeing Qin Yining dashing out while lifting her skirt, Qin Huayuan's smile dimmed his sharpness. He patted his beloved daughter's shoulder with his big hand and said with a smile, I knew you would be safe and sound. Qin Yining gave a big smile, Father, have you been well these days? Where's my mother? Qin Huayuan smiled and said, Your mother is behind. Just as he finished speaking, he saw second Madam and Mammy Qin supporting the old Madam as they rushed over. Brother Mang, my brother Mang. You've finally come back. Why didn't you say anything and disappear without a trace? You're taking Mother's life. The old Madam shouted and threw herself at Qin Huayuan. She hugged him and wailed incessantly, causing everyone's nose to ache. Qin Huayuan immediately knelt in front of the old Madam. His voice was trembling, Mother, this son is unfilial and has made you worry. You can hit me or scold me, but please don't hurt your body by crying." The old madam shook her head repeatedly and sobbed silently. She hugged Qin Huayuan and couldn't say a complete sentence. Qin Yining smiled as he watched the scene of mother and son reuniting. He thought of the Sun clan and hurriedly turned around to leave. As soon as he left the courtyard, he saw the Sun clan wearing a thick fur collar cloak and walking side by side with Chao Yuqing. Behind them were Mother Jean and two unfamiliar maidservants, all of whom were carrying large bundles. "Mother!" Qin Yining shouted and rushed to the Sun clan to hug her tightly. "Mother! You're back!" The members of the Sun clan also hugged Qin Yining tightly and said in a choked voice, we're back. I've always been worried about your situation. Your father said that with your intelligence, you would definitely be able to turn misfortune into blessing. Sure enough, your father didn't lie to me. You're really here. Mother, what can happen to me? I'm worried about you." Qin Yining held the Sun clan's hand and looked her up and down carefully, as if he was checking to see if she had lost a single strand of hair. Mother Jean smiled and said, "Fourth miss, don't worry. Madam is doing well these days." Qin Yining nodded and turned to Chao Yuqing with a bright smile. "Concubine Chao, thank you so much." Chao Yuqing had been standing quietly by the side, watching other mothers and daughters reunite. She felt a little lonely and desolate. She didn't expect Qin Yining to take the initiative to thank her. She felt flattered. "Fourth miss, you don't have to thank me. I'm just doing what I should do." Chao Yuqing smiled gently. Qin Yining shook his head and said, "No matter what the reason is, when we were in danger that day, you spared no effort to save my father and mother. I saw it that day. If it weren't for you, my father and mother would have been in danger." Chao Yuqing blushed and shook her head. "Fourth miss, you're exaggerating." The members of the Sun clan said at this time, "You're worthy of this. If it weren't for you and your subordinates, how could we have been safe?" Chao Yuqing smiled and said, "Madam, you're treating me like an outsider." Qin Yining saw that the Sun clan wasn't as hostile to Chao Yuqing as before. Chao Yuqing was also very respectful to the Sun clan, so he was relieved. It was impossible for his father to abandon Chao Yuqing. Ignoring Chao Yuqing's feelings for his father, just the fact that she had saved his life several times when he was in danger was enough to repay. Moreover, the silver-masked spies that Chao Yuqing led were now employed by his father. The relationship between them was inextricably linked, and it wasn't something that could be severed with a single blow. Since they were destined to be friends, it was better for everyone to be harmonious than to be angry all day long. Now that they were in Dezhou, it was different from when they were in the Yan dynasty. In the end, the family still had to stick together, so that they wouldn't give any opportunities to be taken advantage of. It seemed that after going through so much hardship, his mother had changed a lot. Qin Yining and Chao Yuqing, one on the left and one on the right, accompanied the members of the Sun clan as they walked towards the courtyard where the Sun clan resided. At this time, the door to the courtyard on the right was pushed open. Eunuch Lu poked his head out and saw Qin Yining. He hurriedly lowered his voice in surprise and said, "Miss Qin, did something good happen in your family? Did Grand Preceptor Qin find them?" Qin Yining smiled and nodded. "Yes, my father and mother are finally back." "That's great." Eunuch Lu was so happy that he spun around a few times before running back in a daze. "This servant will go and tell the emperor, the royal prince." As he spoke, he had already walked far away. Qin Yining could still faintly hear Eunuch Lu's excited and shrill voice in the courtyard. Qin Yining couldn't help but smile. Although they couldn't get too close to the Yuqi Yan due to their identities, they were all Dayan people. In addition, the Yuqi Yan and his father had a teacher-student relationship, so they still cared about him. Qin Yining, the members of the Sun clan, and Chao Yuqing returned to the courtyard and bowed to the Dowager Duchess. Then, they chatted again. As they spoke, Second Master, Third Master, Qin Yu, and Qin Han also received the news and rushed back. They all surrounded Qin Huayuan and asked him all sorts of questions. The scene was very lively. The Dowager Duchess laughed happily. I haven't been this happy in a long time. Now that the whole family is here, we should celebrate. Mother is right. I'll go and tell the kitchen to add more dishes. Even if the family was tight on money, this meal didn't make a difference. Third Master happily went to give orders. The Dowager Duchess pulled Qin Huayuan's hand and sat next to her. She couldn't help but size him up. Brother Mang has lost weight. You all suffered outside. Previously, the bandit said that if I didn't send Sister Yi to participate in the selection, they would kill you and your wife. Your second brother and your daughter both said that it's not appropriate for our family to send a girl to the palace at this time. On one hand, I was worried about you. I was afraid that you would be harmed because I didn't send Sister Yi to the selection. On the other hand, I had to think about our family. When the Dowager Duchess said this, her tears fell again. However, she wiped them away with her sleeve. Now that you're back, I can be at ease. That's right, why did they let you out? Qin Huayuan frowned slightly and said, how could there be a kidnapping? We weren't kidnapped. I'm afraid that Mother was deceived. The room was silent. Everyone was very surprised and confused. Second Master shook his head and said, you were deceived. If we insisted on sending Sister Yi to participate in the selection that day, we might have fallen into their trap. The Dowager Duchess reacted and angrily slammed the tea table. These people are simply inhumane. Qin Huayuan knew that a lot of trouble had occurred during the time he wasn't at home. Qin Yining interrupted and asked, Father, where did you go during this time? Why didn't Pang Xiao find any news of him when he sent so many people to look for him? Qin Huayuan said, when we escaped that day, we found a nearby village to stay. I wanted to observe for a while, so I stayed in the same place. When I got the news that Emperor Zhou had arranged for people to bring you back to the capital and everyone had left, we slowly set out. We walked and took a look along the way. When we arrived at the capital, we didn't enter the capital. Instead, we went straight to the north and went to a few cities that intersected with the Taitan border to explore the terrain. Time passed unknowingly. Later, I heard some news from the imperial court in Dezhou, so I decided to stay outside for a while and come back when everything was settled. If it wasn't for the Taitan's internal strife, I would have gone to the Taitan to take a look. It turned out to be like this. Father actually took the opportunity to take his wife and concubine on a trip. No wonder Pang Xiao couldn't find him. It turned out that father was already in a Taitan border city. Pang Xiao's people all went to the road they came from and the nearby villages to look for him. How could they find him? The Dowager Duchess's mouth twitched when she heard this. She pinched Qin Huayuan hard and said, since that's the case, why didn't you send a letter home? Do you know how worried we were about you? You went on a trip by yourself. Do you know what kind of life we're living? This time, it was Qin Huayuan's turn to be surprised. I already ordered someone to deliver a letter. He didn't come. The Dowager Duchess was also stunned. I didn't see the person who delivered the letter. Who did you order to deliver the letter? A new attendant I took in along the way. Perhaps there was an accident on the way, or maybe he was greedy for money and ran away with the travel expenses. It's hard to say. Qin Huayuan smiled bitterly and said, I was still enjoying myself outside. I thought that since everyone knew that I was fine, I wouldn't be in a hurry to come back for a few days. Who knew that you didn't get the letter? Everyone looked at each other and then laughed in the end. They didn't expect that the meticulous Qin Huayuan would have such a blunder. Fortunately, eldest brother came back, second master said. A lot of things have happened recently. Without eldest brother by our side, we don't have a backbone. Mother was worried about you and couldn't eat. Fortunately, Sister Yi heard about the news of the Peking investigation in Dezhou and told us in advance. That's why we were able to live peacefully until now. That's right. In the end, Sister Yi didn't guess incorrectly. You really did come back during the Peking investigation. The Dowager Duchess was happy to see her precious son. Even the things that Qin Yining did were pleasing to the eye. Qin Huayuan didn't expect second master to mention the Peking investigation. Immediately, he looked at Qin Yining in surprise and smiled approvingly at her. In the end, she was his daughter. She was still as sensitive to politics as before. She wouldn't be timid just because she was in a different country. Qin Yining blushed under her father's approving gaze. She smiled shyly and said, "Father's return is better than anything else. In the future, as long as our family works together, I don't believe that we won't be able to live well." That's right. Everyone nodded in agreement. Ever since they came to Dezhou, they felt unprecedentedly happy. Qin Huayuan looked at his family emotionally. They had gone through so much hardship. Now that they could be reunited after such a long journey, it was already a gift from the heavens. Qin Huayuan was deeply moved. Just as he was about to speak, a maidservant's voice sounded from outside, "The County Prince of Yan is here." As soon as she finished speaking, the curtain at the door was lifted. Yu Yan, draped in a black sable fur cloak, hurriedly entered. He stood by the door and saw Qin Huayuan. He quietly looked him up and down before letting out a long sigh. Chapter 348. This was the first time the two of them had met face to face in Dezhou after being separated for a long time. Yu Yan gazed at Qin Yining with infatuation. He saw her long, shapely eyebrows, sparkling eyes, jade-like nose, and luscious lips. She seemed to be in a daze. Her every frown and smile attracted admiration. Uncontrollable throbbing in his chest, he almost blurted out a concerned greeting. However, Yu Yan still retained some rationality. He realized that there were many people around and it wasn't convenient for him to say goodbye. He could only suppress his feelings and turn to greet Qin Huayuan. "How have you been these days, Grand Preceptor Qin? You haven't returned for a long time. There have been rumors in the outside world." Shen. This king was very worried after hearing about it. Qin Huayuan looked at Yu Yan's mottled temples and saw his concerned expression. He felt a wave of sadness in his heart. As usual, he performed the formal etiquette of a ruler and his subject. "It's my fault for making the prince worry. Grand Preceptor Qin, please rise quickly." Yu Yan saw him being so courteous and she was moved. After the collapse of the Yan dynasty, his former subjects who came to Dezhou might not be promoted, but each of them had a brighter future than him. He was destined to be a bird in a cage for the rest of his life. He could no longer help them in their careers. However, Qin Huayuan's attitude towards him was still as respectful and intimate as it was in Dian. Other than the change in the way he addressed him, everything else seemed to have not changed. For a moment, Yu Yan was very disappointed but also very moved. Dezhou is more suitable for Grand Preceptor Qin to fulfill your ambitions than Dian. In the future, Grand Preceptor Qin must be diligent. You must not lose face in front of the people of Dezhou as Dian people. In the future, I will have to trouble Grand Preceptor Qin to take care of the subjects who came from Dian. Yu Yan's words made everyone present feel uncomfortable. They couldn't help but sigh at Yu Yan's kindness. Whether or not his words came from his heart, his concern for Qin Huayuan was real. Qin Huayuan bowed respectfully and said, "We'll listen to your instructions. I will do my best. With your words, I can rest assured." Seeing that there were only women here and that his every move was being monitored by others, it was not convenient for him to stay for long. Therefore, he only greeted the old madam with a few words before taking his leave. Before he left, Yu Yen hesitated again and again. In the end, he couldn't resist the deep longing and expectation. He turned around and said, "Miss C, I have something to ask you." Qin Yining frowned slightly. She would never forget the bad memories of being forced by this person in the palace. When she saw that Yu Yan's hair had turned white at such a young age, although she sighed for him, it was impossible for her to not have any grudges. However, this was no longer the palace of Dian. Yu Yan's every move was being monitored by others. He probably wouldn't do anything to her. With that in mind, Qin Yining looked inquiringly at Qin Huayuan. When he saw Qin Huayuan nod, Qin Yining followed Yu Yen out. When the old madam saw this, she was in a good mood and teased, "It seems that the county king of Yen still has feelings for our sister Yi." Back then, Sister Yi did not become the empress because they were not fated to be together. Now that Sister Yi's reputation is ruined, it would be a good thing if she could become the county king of Yan's concubine. When Qin Huayuan heard this, he frowned. Just as he was about to speak, the Sun clan spoke first. "The old madam's words are reasonable, but Sister Yi is not an ordinary girl. Her marriage should be decided by the old master." The old madam was speechless for a moment. When she thought of their family situation in the Zhou dynasty and how they had to rely on their eldest son everywhere, she really couldn't use her status as an elder to oppress others. However, the old madam had never liked the Sun clan. Naturally, she wouldn't give her any face. She immediately said sarcastically, "It's true that a scholar who has been away for 3 days must be looked at with new eyes. You used to be a one-track-minded person, but now you've learned to involve Brother Mang." They had just returned and the old madam was already provoking them. The Sun clan had never been people who could swallow their anger. The moment they opened their mouths, they wanted to argue with her. However, Chao Yuqing took the Sun clan's arm first and pinched her suggestively. "The old madam is in the spring and autumn period. You should take good care of yourself. Always looking for trouble at the slightest thing will harm your body." The old madam didn't expect that Chao Yuqing would speak for the Sun clan. Shouldn't the wife and the concubine be at odds with each other? After going out for a while, they actually targeted her together. In the past, the old madam flattered Chao Yuqing a lot because of Chao Yuqing's family background. Now that the Dian court was gone, Chao Yuqing had long become rootless duckweed. She was only a concubine of her son. Why would the old madam care? You really know the rules. When the master speaks, is there a place for you, a servant, to speak? Chao Yuqing raised her eyebrows and sneered, "From the beginning when I entered your family, I was ordered to cooperate with Qin Darren and cooperate with him. Being a concubine is just a cover-up. Now, I have already asked Darren for a concubine release. I am no longer the nominal servant of your family, but Darren's imperial bodyguard captain. If the old madam isn't afraid that one day, the silver-masked spies will come late at night, please show some respect." In the end, Chao Yuqing was a person who had seen blood. When she looked at people seriously, it was really frightening. Thinking of the time when Chao Yuqing led the silver-masked spies to fight against the enemy in Dian and the legendary silver-masked spies, the old madam couldn't help but swallow a mouthful of saliva. She blinked her eyes and couldn't say a word. When the Sun clan heard this sentence, they were still in shock and forgot to react for a moment. The scene instantly quieted down. Only then did Qin Huayuan say, "I have my own arrangements for Sister Yi's matter. Mother doesn't need to worry." Qin Yining was his only pearl, so he didn't like the old madam's words. That was why he allowed the womenfolk to bicker a bit. However, he was still her son, so it wasn't good for him to anger his mother too much. Qin Yining didn't know what was going on inside the room. At this time, she was walking side by side with Yu Qiyan on the hand-folding veranda. They were slowly walking towards the front of the courtyard. The two's attendants were following behind them from a distance. Yu Qiyan said, "Your complexion has been pretty good recently. I think your body should be fine now, right?" When Qin Yining was in the prince's fu, she ate medicinal cuisine, abalone, and sea cucumber. Now, her body was a lot better. "Thank you for your concern, Royal Prince. I'm fine. Royal Prince, please take care of yourself." Qin Yining slowed down her steps and once again trailed behind Yu Qiyan by half a body. When Yu Qiyan saw her like this, he also slowed down his steps and insisted on walking alongside her. "Whether I take care of myself or not, this is the end of my life. I'm just worried about you." Qin Yining felt that these words were too ambiguous. They didn't have any relationship, so what was there to be worried about? "Thank you, Royal Prince." Seeing her reply so dryly, Yu Qiyan helplessly said, "You're still like this. It seems like you still hold a grudge against me. Your words are too serious." Qin Yining continued to be distant and courteous as she replied. Yu Qiyan stopped in his tracks and looked at her seriously. "I know about what happened to you a few days ago. Don't worry, I will discuss it with your father later. You don't have to worry about ruining your reputation and not being able to marry into a good family. Why don't you come with me? Although I don't have the chance to make a meteoric rise, I can still respect and love you for the rest of my life and give you a warm family." At this point, Yu Qiyan nervously clenched his fists and said anxiously, "Sister Yi, let me take care of you, okay?" Qin Yining frowned. Before she could answer, a cold snort suddenly came from the entrance of the courtyard. Royal Prince Yan Shuer is in a good mood. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound. Who else could it be other than Pang Xiao, dressed in a purple brocade robe and a cloak with a silver fox fur collar? Mini Theater, Pang Xiao, I've been poached. I'm so happy. Chapter 349. Qin Yining was rather surprised that Pang Xiao had come in person. Logically speaking, Pang Xiao should have avoided this place to avoid the emperor's suspicion that he had eased relations with the Yan dynasty's surrendered subjects. However, Qin Yining thought for a while, and understood a little. Pang Xiao wasn't a stupid person. So, he had probably prepared a show in advance before he came here. Pang Xiao's eyes were burning with rage as he glared at Yu Qiyan. His eyes were almost burning through his frail body. It seems that the county prince of Yan is quite comfortable being the ruler of a fallen country. You. That one sentence was like a knife stabbing into his heart. Yu Qiyan's face turned red as he glared at Pang Xiao. He was so angry that his entire body trembled. Pang Xiao laughed coldly. The only one among the men of the Yuqi family that was acceptable was the Prince of Ning. He was a real man. He knew that his country was about to fall, and he would rather die on the battlefield than admit defeat. Although he died under my blade and I have the scars he gave me, I still admire and respect him from the bottom of my heart. As for you. Pang Xiao slowly walked closer. Whether it was his height or his aura, he suppressed Yu Qiyan so much that he could not raise his head. If you were a real man, you would have killed yourself to thank your ancestors. That way, I would have respected you for being a real man. You are a different kind of person from that incapable ruler. You've done well. Not only do you not feel the shame of being the ruler of a fallen country, you still have the nerve to flirt here. Do you still think you are the emperor? Although I don't want this woman, why don't you take a look in the mirror and see what you look like now? Take care of people. You should take care of yourself first. Pang Zhao's voice was not loud, but every word hit Yu Qian's heart like a heavy hammer. It was about to turn his heart into meat paste. His face was burning. There was a voice in his head that agreed with Pang Zhao's words. He was indeed as he said. He had no courage at all. He also knew that he did not have the courage of his imperial uncle. He wanted to refute, but he could not find the right words. This was de Zhou's territory. He was no longer the emperor, but a county prince. The arrogant and domineering person in front of him was a prince of a different surname. He had entered the cabinet because of his military achievements and was able to participate in important decisions. With such a comparison, he was simply too ashamed to show his face. Qin Yining saw Pang Zhao was so mean and provocative. He could not help but feel angry and amused. Pang Zhao was only 30% of her acting was 70% was probably due to jealousy. She was already an adult, and she hadn't done anything out of line. Yu Qian had only asked a question, and with his current status, he couldn't do anything about it. How could this person be so calculative, like a child whose candy had been snatched away? Qin Yining looked at Pang Zhao with a serious expression, but her beautiful eyes were full of smiles. Pang Zhao felt his face heat up from her gaze. He also felt that he had gone a bit overboard, so he glared at her. If he had not coincidentally met her today, he would not have deeply understood how popular his sister Yi was. When they attacked Dian, the Yu Qian tried to please Qin Yining in every possible way. He even forcefully brought her into the palace with the intention of making her his. If he had not thought of that idea, Qin Yining would have become one of the women in the Yu Qian's harem. This silly girl, she still had the mood to look at him and smile. Although that was what he thought, Pang Zhao's anger was mostly dissipated by her gentle gaze. He coughed and coldly glared at Qin Yining. What? Have you finally found a way out after leaving this king's mansion? Don't worry, if there is really someone who does not care about your past and is willing to marry you, this king will definitely give you a big gift to add to your dowry. It will not be a waste for us to know each other, but you can't become someone's concubine, right? If the woman that this king likes becomes someone's concubine, isn't that self-deprecating? Don't you dare go too far. Yu Qian saw that Pang Zhao was humiliating Qin Yining and couldn't take it anymore. If I report you, I don't know what your Majesty's decision will be. Your Majesty's decision is a matter for the future. It is not up to you to say anything. Pang Zhao laughed mockingly. Yu Qian was so angry that his face and ears turned red. Just as he was about to argue, Qin Huayuan, who had received little Lu's report, arrived at the courtyard. Prince Zhongshuan, what brings you here? Qin Huayuan had a smile on his face and his voice was gentle. Pang Zhao raised his eyebrows and said, It's nothing. I just came to visit and greet an old friend. His attitude was very arrogant, which was completely different from when he met Qin Huayuan before. Qin Huayuan's eyes narrowed slightly. He already had many guesses in his heart. The Sun Clan, the second master, his wife, and the third master, followed closely behind. However, they were dissatisfied with Pang Zhao's disrespectful attitude. Especially the Sun Clan. In Dian, Pang Zhao used to call her mother-in-law. For the sake of Qin Yining, he did everything he could to flatter her incisively and vividly. However, in such a short time, this person changed his attitude like flipping a book. When they came back, they had heard some rumors about the relationship between Qin Yining and Pang Zhao. The Sun Clan did not take it seriously. Now, it seemed that she had been too optimistic. The Sun Clan was so angry that their faces and ears turned red. They suppressed their anger and did not speak. Qin Huayuan's attitude was still gentle. He said politely, I see. I didn't know when Prince Zhongshuan and the county king of Yan became friends. Moreover, there is a new way for friends to greet each other. Or is this the custom of the capital? This old man has little talent and knowledge. This is the first time I have experienced it. Pang Xiao could not help but sigh inwardly at Qin Huayuan's watertight words. If he became enemies with this person, his life would be very difficult. Although he thought so, he still looked very arrogant. Lord Qin, you will have many opportunities to experience it in the future. When Qin Huayuan saw Pang Xiao's attitude and tone, he could already confirm that Pang Xiao's attitude was indeed problematic. Even if a person wanted to change, they would not change so much in such a short time. He looked at Qin Yining again. As a father, he naturally knew about the relationship between Qin Yining and Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao's provocation did not reach Qin Yining's eyes. He did not know what these two children were plotting. Qin Huayuan was certain of his guess. He shook his head in amusement and said with a face full of anger, Prince Zhongshuan is busy. This old man will not keep you any longer. Please. Qin Huayuan cupped his hands and called for Qin Yining. Sister Yi, let's go back. Qin Yining bowed her head and followed behind her family. When Yu Qiyan saw her lonely appearance, he felt as if someone had reached into his chest and was twisting and twisting, almost digging out his heart and lungs. Yu Qiyan had never craved power as much as he did now. If he could have supreme power, how could he allow Pang Xiao to be so presumptuous? He would not be humiliated in front of others. When Qin Yining was humiliated, he could not even stand up for her. When the Qin family returned to their rooms, Pang Xiao and Yu Qiyan could not continue to stay in the courtyard. Pang Xiao smiled provocatively at Yu Qiyan and said in a low voice, What, are you not satisfied? Yu Qiyan gritted his teeth and did not bother to answer. Pang Xiao said, Do you know that there is karma in this world? What you are suffering now, who knows if it is not the result of your father's evil deeds? When your father indulged your imperial mother to eat Qin Si's flesh, what did you do? After you took over power, what did you do to her? Now you are acting like an infatuated person, don't you feel ashamed? Yu Qiyan was a weak scholar. Before he was born, he had always been in contact with people who were kind and elegant. This was the first time someone had pointed at his nose and humiliated him. What the other party said was the truth. Seeing that Yu Qiyan did not speak, Pang Xiao smiled and said, Oh right, there is another news. Seeing that you were once the emperor of Dian, I will tell you this matter is related to the Dian. Yu Qiyan suddenly looked up at Pang Xiao. Pang Xiao said in a low voice, Your retired emperor took the money from the internal treasury and the national treasury, as well as the money from the rice and grain tax, and hid them all in one place. Do you know that? Yu Qiyan heard this and suddenly opened his eyes wide. Pang Xiao said with a smile, Don't worry, your majesty has ordered the troops to split into several groups. We must find the whereabouts of that batch of treasures. This king also thanks you on behalf of your majesty for your selfless dedication. I believe that in the near future, we will definitely find that treasure. At that time, I will hold a banquet to thank you properly. Yu Qiyan thought about what his imperial father had done in the past. His whole body trembled as if he had fallen into an ice house. His imperial father had hidden such a large amount of silver, not to accumulate strength for the Dian dynasty, but for himself to be able to make a comeback one day. Why did he end up with such a father? The retired emperor refused to use that money for the people, refused to use it for the country, and insisted on keeping it for himself. Now that the Dezhou people had sent people to search everywhere, wouldn't the Dian dynasty's silver soon fall into Dezhou's treasury? Yu Qiyan's face turned from white to red, and from red to purple. There was a fishy taste in his throat, and he almost spat out a mouthful of blood. Pang Xiao seemed to be too lazy to continue talking to Yu Qiyan. He clasped his hands behind his back and looked in the direction of the main house. Only then did he walk away with an air of arrogance, humming a festive tune. Yu Qiyan looked at Pang Zhao's back, and countless voices clamored in his mind. He resisted the discomfort and quickly returned to his courtyard with eunuch Lu's help. As soon as he entered the door, he vomited. There were traces of blood in his vomit, which frightened Li Yanyan and Gu Chang. They hurriedly ordered people to inform their superiors to call for a doctor. While the Yu Qiyan army was in chaos, Qin Yining followed Qin Huayuan to the rear courtyard for a walk. The surroundings were empty, and the father and daughter stood in the courtyard looking at the snowy scenery. If someone came close to eavesdrop, they would be discovered very quickly. Qin Huayuan opened his mouth and asked, "Prince Zhongshuan deliberately came here today to cause trouble?" Qin Yining nodded and said with a smile, "It wasn't just this time. Even when he took me back when we entered the city, and when I went to complain to the emperor, they were all set up on purpose." At this point, Qin Yining couldn't help but say with some apprehension, "Father, my relationship with Pang Zhishi isn't as bad as it seems on the surface. Are you angry with me?" Qin Huayuan stood with his hands behind his back, and his eyes drooped as he muttered, "Father won't be angry with you." Chapter 350. Actually, as early as when Qin Yining followed Xiaoyu to Dezhou and made up her mind to be with Pang Xiao, she had already guessed that her father would have many different attitudes. Perhaps he would advise her to distance herself from Pang Xiao, or perhaps he would tactfully remind her of the importance of her family. However, she had never thought that Qin Huayuan would behave like this. As the head of a large family, shouldn't he only care about the family and not care about his children's wishes? Shouldn't he only strive to maximize the benefits? For example, old Madam, who only cared about profits and built all of her decisions on the basis of the family's and her own interests. This was the norm. However, her father wasn't like this. Instead, he tried his best to put her happiness and wishes first. Qin Yining's heart was warm and her eyes were sore. She took a few deep breaths and suppressed her tears. Only then did she smile at Qin Huayuan and say, "I know that father will support me. Therefore, when facing Pang Zhishi, I've never been afraid. This is because I know that even if I make the wrong choice and fail, I still have a home to return to." Correct. You only need to remember this point. Qin Huayuan patted Qin Yining's shoulder with his large hand. Father has implicated you since you were young. You haven't enjoyed a single day of the life that a young lady from a large family should have. You've suffered a lot outside and survived with great difficulty. Now that you've returned home, you've been burdened by family matters. Everything you've experienced isn't what an ordinary young lady from a large family should experience. Since you haven't enjoyed the happiness of a young lady from a large family, how can father have the nerve to use the standards of a young lady from a large family to tie you down? That would be too unfair to you. As Qin Huayuan spoke, he slowly walked forward. Qin Yining also slowly followed. The snow creaked, leaving behind two sets of footprints, one big and one small. Qin Huayuan continued, "Fortunately, father still has some ability. I'm guessing that Zhou Di will use me to maintain the stability of the imperial court. I also have the ability to protect you. I know you are a smart child. You know what you should do and what you shouldn't do. Father will not nag in front of you. But there is one thing you must learn to protect yourself. You have to protect her physically, emotionally, and even her life. Do you understand?" Qin Yining was visibly moved. He nodded heavily and said, "Father, I understand. I will control myself and won't hurt myself. And I also know that there are many important things in life, and relationships are not everything in life." Qin Huayuan stopped and looked at Qin Yining with a smile. "The fact that you can think this way is already different from many girls your age. Maybe it's because I've seen a lot in the marketplace since I was young. Qin Yining said with a smile, in the face of hunger and poverty, people are most likely to reveal their inferiority. If they encounter a matter of life and death, they are even more likely to reveal their true nature. However, Liang City is located at the border, and there are often invasions and disturbances. We have seen such scenes many times, so it is not strange. Qin Huaiyuan sighed and exhaled a white mist in front of him. That's right, father, Qin Yining said with a smile. Previously, when old madam was on the way here, she threw away our family's belongings. The family has been really hard-pressed for money these days. I privately asked Pang Zhishi to help me find a good residence. After Master Zhong came, I asked him to buy the residence under someone else's name and renovate it. Now, it can be lived in. Oh. Qin Huaiyuan said with a smile, thank you for being so thoughtful. When I came back, I was still thinking about the problem of living there. I didn't expect you to have already settled it. Fortunately, I have some personal belongings. Later, father will go through the formalities with the nominal owner of the residence and have the property fall under your name. Then, our family can move in. It's not good to always live here. Qin Huaiyuan raised his eyebrows and said with a smile, it seems that the Zhaoyun agency made quite a bit of profit for you back then. This is all thanks to your landlord. Qin Yining respectfully acknowledged. After thinking about it, he decided to tell his father the truth. Actually, the Zhaoyun agency didn't make a lot of profit. It's just that when the capital was besieged, the people were in a hurry to escape, so they sold off many properties and shops. I thought that since I couldn't escape anyway, even if I kept the money from the Zhaoyun agency, it would probably be embezzled by the officials appointed by Dezhou. It would be better to give the money to the people to escape. Who knew that the massacre of the city didn't happen, and I inadvertently made a fortune from the national disaster. Qin Huaiyuan raised his eyebrows and looked at Qin Yining. He said with a smile, who knows if good intentions won't be rewarded. Qin Yining smiled bitterly and said, the yield from the land I own now is about. Before she could finish speaking, Qin Huaiyuan waved his hand and interrupted her. Sister Yi, you chose to be with Pang Zhishi, but this path won't be easy. You don't have to tell me how much money you have, or how many businesses and connections you have behind you. Just treat it as your own. In the future, the two of you might encounter a lot of trouble. If you have money and connections, father can rest assured. Qin Yining blinked, and her eyes were gradually covered with a layer of mist. She sniffed and nodded, okay. Qin Huaiyuan smiled and tapped the tip of her nose. He changed the topic and said, I just saw a little girl. She's a stranger. I heard that she's your savior. Qin Yining's heart skipped a beat. Her father was so good to her. It didn't seem right to hide Lian Xiaozhou from him. However, Lian Xiaozhou was the princess of Beiji. Her identity was too special. The fewer people who knew about it, the safer Lian Xiaozhou would be. If her father didn't know, it might not be a bad thing. With this in mind, Qin Yining repeated what she said to Qin Huaiyuan. Qin Huaiyuan didn't suspect anything. He sighed and said, I didn't expect this child's experience to be so similar to yours. It's fate that you two were able to meet. Since she doesn't have parents to rely on, you should take good care of her. This isn't just to repay her savior, do you understand? Yes, father. I understand. Qin Yining smiled brightly. Qin Huaiyuan also smiled back. The father and daughter walked in a circle and chatted as they walked in circles. They left footprints on the snow on the ground. After they finished talking about what happened after they parted, they discussed moving house for a while before returning to their room. The next day, an eunuch from the palace came to pass on an imperial edict, summoning Qin Huaiyuan to the palace for an audience. Qin Huaiyuan had just returned to the capital. The next day, Your Majesty attached great importance to him. This news quickly spread throughout the imperial court. After the imperial court meeting, the Minister of Rights, Lianxingjie, was reprimanded by Your Majesty in public due to his personal integrity problems exposed during the investigation. He was demoted by 3 ranks, from a standard 2nd-rank minister to a standard 5th-rank counselor. As for Qin Huaiyuan, Your Majesty personally appointed him as the new Minister of Rights, a standard 2nd-rank official. When this news spread, the Dian officials who surrendered were both happy and jealous. This was because in the Dezhou dynasty, other than people like Pang Xiao, who had been personally promoted by Your Majesty because of their outstanding contributions, civil officials who wanted to enter the cabinet had to first be chosen as a scholar of the common law. Afterwards, they had to endure in the imperial court for 10 to 20 years like boiling oil. Only when they became a standard 2nd-rank minister of the 6 ministries would they have the opportunity to enter the cabinet. Qin Huaiyuan being appointed as the Minister of Rights was tantamount to telling everyone that he would be the next to enter the cabinet. The old madam sat in the parlor of the main room in the new rear residence drinking tea. She heard a message from the little maidservant that she had just bought. She smiled so much that her eyes narrowed into slits. "You're my Manguber after all." She then said to second master, "You should also discuss with your older brother what kind of official to choose." Qin Yining frowned when she heard this. This matter wasn't up to her father to decide. Chapter 351. Old Madam took the invitation and didn't immediately open it. Instead, she carefully read the invitation and used the hand with the jade ring to gently stroke it. The smile on her lips was relieved and satisfied. In the end, it was her most beloved brother Meng who had the ability. Since the return of the legitimate eldest son, good things happened in the family one after another. First, they moved. Her son was regarded highly by Your Majesty. Now, even the nobles of Dezhou began to send invitations to their family. Didn't this mean that the family Qin status had once again risen to the ranks of the upper class and they didn't have to look at other people's faces anymore? What old madam was most afraid of was that the family Qin would be ruined in his generation. If that really happened, she wouldn't have the face to see the ancestors of the family Qin even if she closed her eyes. Now, it was all good. Her hanging heart was also relieved. When everyone saw old madam gently stroking the invitation and treating it more gently than her grandchildren, they couldn't help but have their own thoughts. Qin Yining shook his head in amusement and didn't say much. Thinking about it, being able to live such a life again, old madam could finally put down the big stone in her heart. After old madam finished admiring the invitation, she opened it to read the contents. Then, she smiled and sighed with emotion. This Marchioness of Zhongyong is actually a very amiable person. Amiable. Qin Yining recalled Madame Lu's dainty face and arrogant attitude. He really couldn't associate the word amiable with her. This woman wasn't someone easy to deal with. If she was going to attend the banquet, she needed to do her homework in advance just in case. Old madam is right. We are all newcomers. Thinking about it, those who take the initiative to make friends with us should be easy to get along with. Qin Yining smiled and joined in the fun. Second foreign also said, "Fortunately, eldest uncle came back. Otherwise, we would still be living in the guest house. How could such a good thing happen?" Old madam liked Qin Huaiyuan. Naturally, she liked to hear people praise him. Second foreign is right. This time, it's all thanks to Brother Meng. Second old master and third old master looked at each other and quietly lowered their heads to drink their tea. In any case, the two of them had already accepted their fate. Their mother's heart was completely biased. Fortunately, their eldest brother was very good to them, and he was indeed very outstanding. Although the two brothers were sometimes jealous, they didn't have any enmity towards Qin Huaiyuan. However, Han's second young mistress said, It's just that this Marquis of Zhongyong did not do things properly and only sent an invitation to Sister E. What about the other girls in our family? When Qin Yining heard this, he only looked at Han's second young mistress and did not refute. When she had first returned to the residence, Qin Yining had helped her a lot. After a long time, Qin Yining discovered that Qin Han was an extremely open-minded and straightforward person. Therefore, she was very close to this cousin of hers. Although Han's second young mistress was sometimes a little narrow-minded, she wasn't a bad person. However, today's words without meaning it, in the end, still made people feel uncomfortable. As expected, the smile on Qin Huining's face became somewhat stiff. He smiled bitterly and said, "Second sister-in-law is joking. I'm an adopted daughter, and eighth sister is a concubine's daughter. Of course, the two of us can't be compared to fourth Mississippi." When second old madam heard this, she frowned and glared at Han's second young mistress. Mammy Qin, who was standing behind old madam, also secretly shook her head. Eighth Miss cast a sidelong glance at Qin Huining and smiled innocently. This has nothing to do with being a concubine's daughter. She invited people to the banquet for no reason. Presumably, it was also for eldest uncle. Eldest uncle only has fourth sister as his only legitimate daughter. Isn't it natural for Lu Furen to only send an invitation to fourth sister? Qin Huining almost couldn't maintain the smile on her face after hearing 8th Miss's words. She really didn't understand what 8th Miss was thinking. Nowadays, other than Qin Yining, only 8th Miss was of family Qin descendant. Could it be that she didn't want to compete with Qin Yining? It was only because she was an adopted daughter that she couldn't do anything about it. Otherwise, she would have already thought of a way to wipe away her previous shame. Second master coughed in a low voice and said, "Miss 8 is right. Although you don't need to sew and mend to supplement the family's expenses these days, you girls should stay at home and learn how to embroider. If there's nothing important, don't meddle in the affairs of the outside world. This is only in front of your own family. If you go out in front of outsiders, aren't you afraid of being laughed at for being so petty?" Old Master didn't like Qin Huining's behavior, so his tone was naturally strict. Qin Huining was reprimanded until her face turned red and her face burned. She lowered her head and didn't dare to speak, but tears of grievance welled up in her eyes. Qin Yining helplessly shook her head. If she was Qin Huining, she would obediently prepare for marriage right now. She believed that the family Qin wouldn't choose a bad husband for her for the sake of her face. She would live her life peacefully for the rest of her life. How good would that be? But she couldn't see through it and wasn't willing to give up. Since she had already decided to attend the banquet, she didn't wait for Qin Yining to make a move. Old Madam had already urged her to change her clothes and dress up. Qin Yining called Xian Yun to her side and asked in a low voice, "What is the background of this Madame Lu? The last time I saw her in the palace, I saw that she was even more dignified than Anyang eldest princess. Even Anyang eldest princess had to call her older sister." Xian Yun had stayed in the capital for a long time and was very familiar with the people in the capital. Hearing this, she said in a low voice, "Miss, you don't know. This Madame Lu is a legitimate daughter of the Lu family side branch. The Lu family is a large aristocratic family that has been around for more than 100 years. It was already deeply rooted in the country of Beiji. Their family's businesses are all over the country and are involved in all walks of life. Their connections and power can't be underestimated. When Your Majesty started the war, if it wasn't for the financial support of the Lu family, he probably wouldn't have been able to conquer the capital. Your Majesty also thinks highly of the Lu family. The people of the Lu family outside the capital all have high statuses. Back then, Madame Lu was betrothed to General Mi. Oh, perhaps you don't know, but General Mi, Wang Yi, and Marquis Ding Bei are brothers who fought together. They have been through life and death together. However, General Mi was born into a peasant family and had ordinary looks. He was also older than Madame Lu by more than 10 years. Madame Lu never liked General Mi. Even if General Mi doted on her a lot, she was never satisfied. Relying on the fact that she was a member of the Lu family, General Mi wouldn't do anything to her, so she started to openly raise gigolos. Gigolos. Qin Yining stopped what she was doing and turned around to look at Ji Yun in shock. Ji Yun said, "Miss, don't doubt it. This is all true. General Mi has always been a cuckold. After he died in battle, he was posthumously conferred the title of Marquis Zhongyong. Madame Lu then became the Marquis' wife and did things even more unscrupulously. Many people outside said that General Mi died in battle because he was angered by Madame Lu. He was a dignified man, yet he was suppressed by such a wife. The Yu family's power is too great. In addition, Your Majesty thinks highly of the Lu family. If General Mi wanted to escape, he could only die." Qin Yining was dumbfounded. After a long time, she nodded and sighed. She's really a powerful woman. This kind of person had no bottom line. She had to be careful. After dressing up properly, Qin Yining brought Ji Yun and Xian Yun to the Marquis Zhongyong's residence in a carriage. Chapter 352. The maidservant who came to greet them had a delicate and pretty appearance. She wore a light pink vest inlaid with white wind feathers and an emerald green cotton jacket. She was dressed in a clean and delicate manner. Qin Yining guessed that she was Madame Lu's capable maidservant. "Thank you for your trouble." Qin Yining smiled and nodded. With the support of Ji Yun and Xian Yun, she stepped on the wooden stool and got off the carriage. Qin Yining wore a snow-white fox fur coat with a sky-blue robe and a crescent-white 8-piece skirt. Her outfit was simple and elegant like an orchid, but her appearance was bright and beautiful. Even the light clothes couldn't suppress her sharp beauty. When the maidservant saw her clearly, she was stunned for a moment. She hurriedly smiled and curtsied. No wonder Madame Lu always praises Miss Qin's appearance. "Now, isn't your opinion just like the bright moon?" Qin Yining adjusted her skirt and smiled slightly. "Your Majesty is like the sun, and the Empress is like the bright moon. The sun and the moon shine together. I'm just the light of a candle. How could I dare to accept such praise?" When the maidservant heard this, she broke out in a cold sweat. This Miss Qin was indeed worthy of being the daughter of the famous minister of a generation, Qin Huaiyuan. She was too sharp and cautious. Originally, the maidservant didn't have any other intentions. She just couldn't help but want to flatter and praise her. However, after hearing Qin Yining's words, she made a slip of the tongue. The maidservant didn't dare to delay and smiled as she led Qin Yining into the manor. After entering the Marquis Zhongyong's estate, Qin Yining discovered that there were no old people walking around the estate. Moreover, all the servant girls she saw were young and beautiful, and all the manservants had decent appearances. Qin Yining thought of the rumors about Madame Lu's appearance and vaguely understood. They walked through the mountains and corridors until they arrived at the main hall. 2 young manservants dressed in green were guarding the door. Qin Yining frowned slightly. What kind of banquet was this? If he had only invited a woman, why would there be a servant to serve her? Qin Yining calmly entered through the door, took off the fox fur coat, and handed it to Xian Yun. With his eyes, he signaled Xian Yun to wait outside, while he led Ji Yun through the main entrance with the maidservant who led the way. After bypassing the glass screen, they came to a spacious and warm hall. The interior of the hall was covered with a red Persian carpet. Lily incense was burning in an incense burner on the floor, and a faint sweet smell lingered in the air. At the head of the table, Madame Lu and elder Princess Anyang were already seated. There were 2 tables on each side, and 3 young women had already taken their seats. The empty seat on the left was obviously prepared for Qin Yining. Qin Yining calmed himself down and went forward to greet eldest Princess Anyang with a smile. "Greetings, eldest princess." Li Helan was used to these women's jewelry. She narrowed her eyes when she saw Qin Yining, who was wearing a fresh outfit and had beautiful skin. But his absent-mindedness only lasted for a moment, and then he smiled amiably and said, "Qin Mimi is here. No need to be so polite, today Sister Lu is the host." Qin Yining bowed to Madame Lu again. "This little sister is new here, but Madame Lu doesn't mind. I am really grateful for your invitation today." Madame Lu faintly made an "n" sound. She pointed to the empty seat on the left and said, "Sit down, the people who came today are not outsiders. Qin Mimi is new to the capital, so you must not be familiar with the capital's matters. Let's just gather as sisters and get to know each other." "Yes, many thanks, Madame Lu." Qin Yining sat down on the empty seat. Madame Lu smiled and introduced the other three to her. She had a plump figure and was about 30 years old. She was Madame Lu's older sister. Her husband was doing business outside. Because her husband's surname was Chui, everyone called her Chui Lusher. The delicate and pretty woman with a worried expression was Madame Kai, but she had been a widow for many years. The younger one was Madame Lu's younger sister born of a concubine. Because she didn't introduce her, Qin Yining called her little Lusher in her heart. Apart from her, there were also Madame Lu's older sister, Madame Lu's younger sister born of a concubine, the eldest princess of Anyang, and Madame Kai. Qin Yining could tell that today's banquet was probably a show of goodwill from Madame Lu's side branch of the Lu family Qin in the capital. Even if she didn't know whether the Lu family and the family Qin would stand on opposite sides in the future, this gesture was necessary. The Lu family must have made arrangements for her father. As she was thinking, Madame Lu smiled and said, "I invited Qin Mimi here today for 2 reasons. First, to get to know us sisters. Second, I saw that Qin Mimi has been through a lot, and your appearance is outstanding. I deeply feel that you and I are kindred spirits, so I want to befriend you." Her tone was very different from the previous time when she was at Daggers Drawn and Hostel. "That's right." Chui Lusher nodded with a smile and said, "I originally thought that women with the same appearance and character as my Mimi and the eldest princess of Anyang are rare. Today, after seeing Qin Mimi today, I finally understand why Prince Zhongshuan was so infatuated with you. Not to mention men, even I feel my bones go soft when I see you." Qin Yining felt that these words were a bit outrageous, but because she didn't know these people, she didn't say much and just smiled. Madame Lu raised her eyebrows and smiled, then raised her jade hands and clapped 3 times. In the next moment, melodious music sounded. Qin Yining looked in the direction of the sound, only to find that there were already musicians waiting behind the red pillars and hanging bead curtains. In the midst of the melodious music, several dancers dressed in light muslin leisurely walked over and danced gracefully, each of their steps light as if they were stepping on lotus flowers. Then, several men slowly walked into the room. These men were dressed differently, their figures and appearances were different, and their temperaments were also different, but each of them was a handsome man with an outstanding temperament. Some were tall and elegant, while others were tall and imposing. There were even 2 handsome young men who looked exactly the same, one in red and the other in white, as refined as the red and white plum blossoms. Qin Yining didn't understand why so many men had come, but in his heart, he was even more displeased with this banquet. It seemed that this Madame Lu really didn't pay attention to etiquette. How could a woman's banquet allow men to enter? When Madame Lu saw these people, she immediately smiled and pointed to a young man with a tall and imposing figure, who was wearing a silver white sleeved shirt and said, "Why aren't you pouring wine for the eldest princess?" Then she pointed to a 17 or 18-year-old scholar in white and said, "Fill Miss Qin's cup as well." That elegant white-clothed scholar faintly smiled and then came to Qin Yining's side. His white and slender fingers picked up the jade pot and filled Qin Yining's green jade cup. Then he secretly sat down in the empty seat beside Qin Yining. Qin Yining didn't have any expression on his face. He watched as the handsome man who looked like a Pang Xiao sat down beside eldest Princess Anyang. His left hand held the pot and poured wine, while his right hand intimately rested on the back of eldest Princess Anyang's chair behind her. This kind of offense made eldest Princess Anyang's face flush red. She shyly looked at the man's side profile and then lowered her head. Qin Yining finally understood why these people had come. It was like when men were discussing business, they wanted to drink wine with women. It seemed that Madame Lu had invited her to this banquet to drink wine with women. She was an unmarried girl. What did Madame Lu mean by this? Thinking of Madame Lu's opening words, Qin Yining's face turned red and even her neck turned red. These people must have thought that since she had already been stolen by Pang Xiao, she should already know what was going on. Moreover, since Pang Xiao had kidnapped her, she might not like that kind of imposing man. Therefore, they had arranged for a gentle and elegant man to serve her. It wasn't a secret that eldest Princess Anyang liked Pang Xiao, so Madame Lu had arranged for a man with a similar temperament to Pang Xiao to serve her. Should she praise Madame Lu for being so meticulous? Young Miss Qin. The elegant man beside her saw that Qin Yining wasn't drinking and immediately picked up the cup. He had a gentle smile as he looked at her. His light brown eyes were filled with a warmth that could melt the winter snow. Young Miss Qin, please eat a cup. This is a fruit wine specially prepared for you. It isn't very strong, but it is sweet and refreshing. Qin Yining pursed her lips and pushed aside the wine cup that the man was about to bring to her lips. She said in a cold voice, "No need. There was no good wine and no good banquet. Madame Lu dared to arrange for these men to drink wine, so how could she dare to use the things here?" The man stared at Qin Yining's pretty face with infatuation. He had been mesmerized for a long time. He didn't expect her to reject him, so he was caught off guard and spilled a glass of wine on his sleeve and half of his clothes. The commotion here immediately alarmed the person at the head. Madame Lu's red lips were slightly opened as she took a piece of orange from the red-clothed twin. She was leaning against the white-clothed youth's chest and angrily looked over when she heard the commotion. Qin Yining stood up and bowed to Madame Lu and Li Helan as she said, "Many thanks for Madame Lu and eldest Princess Anyang's good intentions, but this little girl still has matters to attend to at home. It isn't convenient for me to stay here, so I'll be leaving first." After saying this, she turned around and called out to the red-faced Ji Yun before turning to leave. Madame Lu suddenly sat up and fiercely slammed the table. "Qin clan. You dare to give me face? If you dare to step out of this door, then don't blame me for being ruthless." Qin Yining gave a cold laugh. She turned around and sternly looked at Madame Lu and Li Helan. "Do you think I grew up being scared? Moreover, you and I have just met, so what kind of feelings do we have? I want to ask eldest Princess Anyang, does Marquis Dingbei know that you're coming to the banquet?" "You?" Li Helan was furious when he heard this, but his heart was filled with panic. He felt a bit guilty and his mouth didn't think before speaking. "What are you so noble about? You're just a withered flower that Big Brother Xiao played with. Today, I gave you a chance to taste what gentleness feels like, but you don't appreciate it." Qin Yining's face was like ice as he coldly said, "Then eldest Princess Anyang wants to taste the taste of power. So you found this kind of person? You're shameless." Li Helan's heart was poked where it hurt. He was both embarrassed and angry, his eyelashes already filled with tears. The man who had a similar build to Pang Xiao quickly hugged Li Helan and softly comforted her. Chapter 353. Qin Yining was too lazy to look at this chaotic scene. She turned around and left. Xian Yun quickly came forward to help Qin Yining put on a cloak. Ji Yun supported her on the other side as they quickly walked out. Li Helan was so angry that her entire body was trembling. She angrily shouted, "Come, take her away for this princess." Yes. The servants that came with the princess's manor immediately obeyed and surrounded Qin Yining, Ji Yun, and Xian Yun. They were only waiting for Li Helan's order to move. If it was a normal girl, seeing so many guards and servants surrounding her with unkind expressions while she was in someone else's territory, she would have already become afraid. But Qin Yining was used to big scenes. She had encountered many assassination attempts, so she naturally wasn't as timid as a normal girl. She calmly turned around and looked at Li Helan with a smile that wasn't a smile. Her voice was gentle as if she was discussing what to eat for dinner, but the sharpness in her words was very clear. "Eldest Princess of Anyang, today I was invited to the banquet hosted by Madame Liu. The invitation was seen by everyone in my family. Isn't it inappropriate for you to act like this at the host's banquet? Also, if I lose a single strand of hair here, the family Qin won't let this matter go. Or is it that you're following an imperial edict today?" The word imperial edict hit Li Helan's greatest fear. Li Helan knew that her happiness was dependent on Li Qitian's grace, so she would never go against Li Qitian's wishes. Just like her marriage, she had to obey Li Qitian's wishes in exchange for stability and happiness. The Empress Dowager had told Li Helan in private that Li Qitian attached great importance to the family Qin. This was because Li Qitian needed to rope in the Dian faction that surrendered. If they really quarreled and Li Qitian misunderstood her, she would have no happiness to speak of in the future. Li Helan was scared and angry, but he didn't dare to ask the servants to take the Qin Yining directly. He just glared at her angrily. Qin Yining hunted all year round and never retreated even in the face of a hungry wolf. She was even less afraid of a spoiled princess. "Eldest Princess of Anyang, you should think about your own matters. Even if you don't think that you are breaking the rules by doing this behind Prince Consort Ji's back, you should at least think about the face of the imperial family." This was scolding Li Helan for not abiding by the virtues of a wife, for having an affair behind her husband's back. Li Helan's face burned as if it was on fire. She pointed at Qin Yining with her trembling fingernails painted bright red and said sharply, "Who do you think you are? How dare you teach me a lesson? The road is uneven and there will be people stepping on it. I am just feeling wrong for Prince Consort Ji. Besides, if you are not guilty, why would you be so angry?" Li Helan was filled with rage. Hearing this, Li Helan was so shocked that she almost fell over. She quickly waved her hand at the man who looked like Pang Xiao behind her. When the male companions heard that Ji Ziyu and Pang Xiao were here, they were so scared that their faces turned pale. They quickly got up to leave. These two were two killing gods, one from the south and one from the north. Who could afford to offend them? The tall man who looked like Pang Xiao was so scared that his face turned white. Ji Ziyu's might had already shaken the north. He could lead the Dragon Legion to suppress the Taitan soldiers until they couldn't raise their heads. He had actually lost his mind and wanted to enjoy the benefits of being with such a hero. He had simply lost his mind and was tired of living. Qin Yining also heard the servant's message. When he walked out of the door, he saw two people, one in black and one in white, walking side by side. Both of them were equally tall. One of them was wearing a black sable fur cloak, while the other was wearing a white fox fur cloak. Their auras were so cold that it was as if they were possessed by a killing god. Pang Xiao's phoenix eyes narrowed. Although there was still a mocking smile on his face, his eyes were like stars in the cold night, making people feel cold and distant. Ji Ziyu's jade-like handsome face was half hidden in the snow-white fox fur collar. His face was expressionless as he calmly looked into the room. His entire person was as exquisite as a jade carving meticulously carved by a skilled craftsman. This was the first time that Qin Yining had observed Ji Ziyu so closely. He was secretly amazed that there was such a beauty in the world that transcended gender. Pang Xiao had already arrived in front of Qin Yining. He coldly mocked, "You're here too. Is this a place that you can come to?" Qin Yining glanced at the people in the room from the corner of his eyes. He knew that she had to be tough and not contradict her performance just now. Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and said, "Prince Zhongshuan really knows how to joke. Where I am, do I have to report to Wang Yi all the time?" Pang Xiao's face darkened. It was as if he couldn't accept that one of his former playthings had suddenly become so disobedient. On the other hand, Ji Ziyu had already arrived in front of Li Helan. Li Helan's face was pale, but her ears and neck were red. When she saw Ji Ziyu, it was the first time that she was so careful and gentle. "Why is the prince consort here?" Ji Ziyu cupped his hands in greeting to Li Helan. He didn't look at the other women in the room, nor did he pay attention to Cui Lucier and Little Lucier's gazes. He walked straight to the men from before and looked at them with his hands behind his back. He said, "Princess, did you have fun?" No, I didn't. You don't have to explain to me. You are the princess and I am the prince consort. You are my master. You can do whatever you want." Ji Ziyu turned around coldly and looked quietly at Li Helan. Li Helan only felt her heart beating wildly. When she thought back to their wedding night and looked at the person in front of her, she couldn't help but feel her heart beat faster. Such a handsome man was her rightful husband, but he didn't give her any face. It wasn't easy for her to muster up the courage to have fun outside, but she was still discovered by him. Wouldn't their days in the future be more and more difficult? From the corner of her eye, Li Helan saw Pang Xiao glaring angrily at Qin Yining. She felt a wave of bitterness in her heart. These two men, one was her husband, and the other was the person she had secretly loved for so many years. She really didn't want to give up on either of them. Qin Yining winked at Pang Xiao. Then, she led her two maidservants and walked past the people who were trying to stop them. Ji Ziyu was pacing back and forth in front of the group of gigolos. The people who wanted to escape but didn't have the time to do so, in front of the handsome and cold Ji Ziyu, they all shrunk back and trembled like quails. Ji Ziyu was still expressionless. "Which one does the eldest princess like? You might as well ask Madame Lu and bring them back to play." No, Prince Consort, listen to me. I didn't. The eldest princess is a noble, why do you need to explain yourself to a subject like me? Ji Ziyu stopped in front of the tall and sturdy man. He turned around and smiled at Li Helan. "You like this kind of man?" Li Helan's face seemed like it was on fire as she shook her head. Pang Xiao walked towards Madame Lu and asked, "May I ask Madame Lu, are these people your gigolos?" Madame Lu's face was like a spring peach. She shyly looked at Pang Xiao and gently nodded her head. Pang Xiao saw her like this and smiled, saying, "If Madame Lu's gigolos offend this king, can this king deal with them?" Madame Lu was already dazzled by that smile. She didn't have any room to think and could only nod her head. Pang Xiao walked in front of them and asked in a low voice, who was the one serving the eldest princess? The man serving Li Helan was pale and didn't dare answer. The people beside him all looked at him and exposed him. Pang Xiao walked in front of him and asked, "It was you?" The man knelt down with a thump. "This lowly one is following orders. This lowly one doesn't dare. This lowly one doesn't dare." He kowtowed as he spoke. Pang Xiao turned around and asked Li Helan, "Which hand did he use to touch you?" Li Helan's lips trembled. He was so embarrassed that he couldn't find a hole to hide in. Pang Xiao sneered and pulled out the sword at Ji Ziyu's waist. He tapped the man's shoulder twice and said angrily, you dare touch my brother's woman. You're seeking death. Chapter 354. Pang Zhao's sword was dripping with blood. His phoenix eyes were cold and sharp, but his slanted eyebrows were slightly raised, as if he was enjoying the smell of blood. He crouched down and said, "How is it? Does it feel good?" The man lying on the ground was in so much pain that his entire body was trembling. He really wanted to faint, but the intense pain pulled at his consciousness, making him more awake than ever. "Wang Yi, I was wrong. I know I was wrong. Wang Yi, please spare me." The man's begging voice was so soft that it was almost inaudible. But in the hall that was so quiet that even a pin drop could be heard, his voice was like a heavy hammer, fiercely pounding on everyone's heart. Madame Lu was already so scared that her face turned pale. After a while, she recovered and said with a frown, "Prince Zhongshuan, how can you be so cruel?" "Cruel? What kind of person is this? This king even thinks that he dirted all Lan's sword." Pang Zhao wiped the blood off the sword on the man's body, then casually threw it to Ji Ziyu. If it was anyone else, they would have been stunned by Pang Zhao's sudden move. But Ji Ziyu still stood in place with a frosty expression. With a clang, the sword accurately returned to the scabbard at Ji Ziyu's waist. Pang Zhao's cool and unrestrained throwing of the sword, Ji Ziyu's complete trust, and the murderous aura exuding from the two at the same time, made everyone present feel terrified. Li Helan looked at the two handsome men, and his ears became even hotter. Madame Lu pursed her lips and smiled. She was moved and said, "Forget it. Since Wang Yi can only be appeased like this, it doesn't matter if Wang Yi takes all of them." When the male companions heard this, they all looked at Madame Lu in disbelief. They never would have thought that Madame Lu would take the initiative to give them away. Looking at the half-unconscious man on the ground with his arms crippled, they all trembled and knelt down to kowtow. Pang Zhao gave a cold smile. "Aren't these Madame Lu's precious treasures? Aren't you afraid that people will be hurt if you say this?" Madame Lu wanted to say, "To make you smile, taking their lives is nothing." But when she looked up, she saw Pang Zhao's cold eyes. Even if he was smiling, his body was filled with murderous aura, as if he was a beast that could pounce at any time. Madame Lu's words, she didn't dare to say them even if she was beaten to death. "Calm." Li Helan quickly chased after the two of them in a panic. "This one doesn't have anything to play with. Husband, send this one back to the princess palace." Ji Ziyu turned around to look at Li Helan and said, "This one is stupid and can't serve the eldest princess well. I'll have to trouble the eldest princess people to serve you well." He didn't reply and ordered the carriage to set off. As the sound of the horse's hooves gradually faded away, Ji Ziyu said helplessly, "Don't you like the Qin clan? Why are you so blunt? How are you going to make up for hurting her heart in the future?" Pang Zhao said, "She's the daughter of my enemy. So what if I like her?" Ji Ziyu silently sighed as he heard this. He then patted Pang Zhao's shoulder and said, "Thank you for your help. There's no need for thanks between brothers. But Alan, you can talk to your majesty about this matter." "What's the use of talking to him? Your majesty doesn't have that much free time to deal with these mundane matters. Besides, I'm supposed to serve the princess. The princess has the freedom to do whatever she wants. She can also have gigolos, but I can only protect my body for her." Ji Ziyu was used to being a man of few words. He would only speak freely in front of his brothers, no longer stingy with his words. Pang Zhao said, "Forget it. Don't think too much. I'll treat you to wine. Come, let's go to my house." As he spoke, he took the reins and nimbly mounted his horse. Ji Ziyu also took his own horse. He looked up at Pang Zhao, who was sitting upright on the horse, and asked, I heard that your dear mother has returned. Is it convenient to go to your house to drink wine? The palace is so big. Don't tell me there's no place for the two of us to drink wine. Don't be so long-winded. Let's go. Ji Ziyu didn't ask any more questions. He mounted his horse and followed Pang Xiao to the palace. The two of them drank wine in the outer courtyard study until the middle of the night. They were both drunk and sprawled out on the heated kang in the study. As for Qin Yining, he only caught up with Qin Huayuan the next evening. He told Qin Huayuan everything that had happened yesterday. In the end, he asked worriedly, "Father, can we really not afford to offend the Lu family?" Qin Huayuan nodded and said, the Lu family was already a famous aristocratic family back in Beiji. Their economic power is unfathomable. It wouldn't be an exaggeration to say that they are as rich as a country. Back then, the Lu family was loyal to your majesty and provided the rebel army with food and money. That's why Dezhou was able to destroy Beiji. It's clear how powerful their family is now. Although that Madame Lu is only from a side branch of the Lu family, even if she's from a side branch, in Dezhou's capital, as long as the surname is Lu, you have to be careful when interacting with them. When Qin Yining heard this, he frowned thoughtfully. After thinking for a while, he said worriedly, "Father, I'm afraid that my actions yesterday have already offended Madame Lu and eldest Princess Anyang. Do you think I've unintentionally offended the Lu family? Harmed our family? I'm really afraid of bringing trouble to our family." Although she didn't regret her decision, she was still worried about her family Qin. After all, her family Qin had only just gained a foothold in Dezhou. How could they become enemies with a large family like the Lu family? When Qin Huayuan saw his daughter's rare listless appearance, he couldn't help but laugh loudly. "Silly girl, what are you thinking about? Have you forgotten what your father told you the day before? Don't be so overcautious and think so much. Just do what you think is right. If something happens, father will help you. We didn't come to this world to suffer and be wronged. No matter how powerful the Lu family is, what can they do?" Qin Yining looked at Qin Huayuan's bright smile and couldn't help but laugh. "Father is right. It's me who's too rigid. No matter how strong the enemy is, we can't retreat. Moreover, I believe that with father's talent, becoming a famous minister is only a matter of time." The father and daughter talked happily, just like when they were in Dian. Qin Huayuan didn't have a son and only had Qin Yining as his only daughter. Naturally, he spoiled her to the bottom of his heart. Qin Yining was never a spoiled and arrogant person. She didn't match the steadiness and open-mindedness of her age. Also, no matter what Qin Huayuan talked about, she could always give her own opinions. The father and daughter really got along well with each other. This made Qin Huayuan want to treat his daughter better and make up for all the pain she suffered when she was young. After 2 days like this, there was suddenly a rumor outside. It was said that Madame Lu and the fourth miss of the family Qin family didn't have the same 8 characters and had long been at odds with each other. When Madame Lu heard that the family Qin family's courtyard was rented, she actually threatened to buy it. Even if it was empty, she wouldn't rent it to the family Qin family. She wanted to let the family Qin family know how powerful she was. In the capital, not just anyone could offend her. When Qin Yining heard this, she couldn't help but laugh. How interesting. This Madame Lu is very interesting. With her around, my days in the capital won't be so boring. Chapter 355. What countermeasures do you have? No matter what can my family do to me? Father and mother won't change their attitude towards me. As for matriarch, even if nothing happened, she has never liked me. Moreover, that Madame Lu only dared to make a ruckus because she had no other choice. Qin Yining was unperturbed. He didn't take Madame Lu's provocation seriously at all. She knew very well that the Lu family was able to last for hundreds of years because the person in power was definitely not an idiot. Madame Lu's way of doing things was domineering and unscrupulous. This type of woman was the root of the family. She was definitely not the core of the Lu family. The Lu family's intentions were still unclear. It was too early to panic. Moreover, she was just a small figure who couldn't control the Lu family's actions. Why should she take it to heart? You're really open-minded. Bing Tang sighed and said, I originally thought that after leaving the Dian and without the fatuous emperor and demon empress, we could live freely in Dezhou. Who knew that after coming here, we would realize that it's impossible to live freely. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh and say, who said that? Aren't we very free now? Free? I don't think so. You're trapped in the house all day. At most, you're just helping Matriarch in the morning and at night. Matriarch's impression of you is already bad. She's always mocking and ridiculing you. It's really depressing. Qin Yining waved his hand and said with a smile, silly girl, do you think I look like an ordinary lady from a wealthy family? Bing Tang was stunned when she heard that. Xian Yun, who was combing Lian Xiaozhou's hair, laughed and said, Miss, you're not an ordinary person. Naturally, you don't have to care about what ordinary ladies do. Qin Yining smiled and said, no matter what I do, as long as the main direction of the matter goes according to my ideas, then I'll be free. Bing Tang asked, then you're saying that this matter also goes according to your ideas? Qin Yining raised her eyebrows noncommittally and said, there are some things that are easier to deal with when they become bigger. He stood up and said, let's wear thicker clothes and take a walk in the courtyard. The weather in Dezhou was cold. It was already February, but the cold wind outside was still bone-chilling. Qin Yining was wearing a thick winter coat and holding a handkerchief. He was talking and laughing with the servant girls as he walked around the courtyard. The current residence was no longer as spacious as it used to be. Now it was just a courtyard with 2 entrances. Each branch was assigned to live in a different room. Therefore, as long as the family wanted to, they could see what was going on in Qin Yining's room. Old Madam put down the pole and closed the rear window. She sat upright and snorted coldly. That girl is living a very happy life. Mammy Qin smiled and brought over a bowl of cheese. She said with a smile, Old Madam, eat some snacks. The kitchen just sent them over. They're still warm. However, Old Madam waved her hand and said, say, although living in this courtyard is good in every aspect, it's just a little small. Once you open the window, you can see the movements of those little hoofs in the back garden. If they speak louder, you can also hear them clearly. I also don't know what's wrong with me now. Once I see 4th girl's crafty appearance, I become impatient. No matter how I look at her, I feel that she's annoying. Mammy Qin thought helplessly, 4th Miss is so similar to 1st Master. She's just a bit fair in doing things, yet you're already hating her. Although Mammy Qin also felt that there were many things that Old Madam did that weren't honorable, she was still loyal to her master. She sighed and said, Old Madam only thinks this way because she's angry. How can that wretched girl offend the Lu family? Old Madam asked her 3 sons yesterday and finally understood how deep the foundation of the Lu family was. She couldn't figure out how Qin Yining offended the Lu family by just attending a banquet. That Marquis Zhongyong is definitely not an ordinary noble. I heard that if General Mi didn't die, he would be at least as famous as Prince Consort Ji and Prince Zhongshuan. The Marquis Zhongyong's wife is also born in the Lu family. How high is her status? What's in the 4th girl's mind? Why doesn't she get along well with others? When Old Madam said this, she angrily slammed the table. The blue and white porcelain bowl with a lid of carps playing with lotuses on the table jingled. Say, if we really become homeless, then we can't afford to lose our face outside. The more old Madam thought about it, the angrier she became. She was in a fit of anger, so the crisp laughter of the girls in the courtyard seemed to be particularly annoying to her. Old Madam was just about to open the window and angrily scold Chin Yining when a maidservant came in from outside the room. Replying to Old Madam, "There's a madam outside and wants to see fourth young miss." Old Madam was worried that her family wouldn't have a house to live in. When she heard the word madam, she immediately thought of Madam Lu. She hurriedly urged Mammy Chin, "Quick, quick, call that wretched girl over. I'll tell her a few words before letting her go see the guest. Otherwise, if we thoroughly offend that person, our family's foundation is still shallow. How can we continue living?" Mammy Chin advised, "Old Madam, I'm anxious. We don't know who is coming yet." Although that was the case, Mammy Chin still went to the rear courtyard to invite Chin Yining over. Chin Yining also heard that a young madam was looking for her, so she instructed Ji Yun and Bing Tang to go to the front to serve that person tea first. She said that she was changing her clothes and would immediately arrive. After entering Old Madam's room, Old Madam angrily said, "Evil creature, look at the trouble you've caused." Chin Yining was baffled by the reprimand. "Old Madam, what's wrong? Why are you so angry?" Old Madam was so angry that she grabbed the lid and was about to smash it. However, she thought that the family wasn't as glorious as before. There was still a set of blue and white porcelain tea sets. If one was smashed, the others wouldn't be able to be used. Thus, she took a deep breath and put down the teacup. "You still have the nerve to ask me? Let me tell you, you must properly apologize today and let Madame Lu's anger dissipate. If it really affects our family, see if I don't ask your father to hang you up and whip you. You don't abide by the rules and don't want to live a good life. Don't implicate the whole family." Old Madam's words were extremely unpleasant. If an unmarried girl was really whipped by her father, her reputation would be ruined. Although she knew that Old Madam was scaring her, Chin Yining still felt anger rising in her heart. "Old Madam, don't worry. I won't implicate the Fu. However, the Fu has relied on me to gain power and wealth, but I didn't see you give me a good face. Now that such a small matter has happened, you've started to speak harshly to me. If all the grandmothers in the world were like you, scolding people without distinguishing between right and wrong, I'm afraid that ordinary young ladies would have to hang themselves. You." Old Madam fiercely slammed the table. "You did something wrong and still don't know how to repent. In the end, you've been living in the countryside since young and haven't received any education. You can't compare to the daughters raised by noble families. Old Madam, please think twice before you speak. I didn't have the fortune to be raised in the Fu. Could it be that I took the initiative to leave the family Qin? The past was the greatest pain in the hearts of Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan. Therefore, the people in the Fu would deliberately avoid this matter. Although Old Madam also avoided this taboo, now that Qin Huaiyuan and the Sun clan weren't around, it made her feel both physically and mentally comfortable to bully her disobedient granddaughter. Old Madam was pestering endlessly mainly because she wanted Qin Yining to admit defeat to Madame Lu. However, Qin Yining couldn't be the first to lower his head. "Old Madam." Qin Yining straightened her expression and said very seriously, "I know that Old Madam said those words in a fit of anger. Moreover, with Old Madam's wisdom, some things can be seen through with just a hint. Right now, I will only say one thing. My father has just come to the Dezhou dynasty and is unfamiliar with the people and the place. The disputes in the imperial court are so complicated. What do you think we should do for my father to let him have a good life?" When Old Madam heard Qin Yining's coaxing tone, she felt a burst of impatience. Right now, she didn't like someone who was pleasing to the eye. Therefore, she couldn't stand her every word and action. Qin Yining didn't expect Old Madam to give an answer, so she just said, "My father is an official in the imperial court. What he wants is to be able to establish himself in the dojo." Old Madam naturally understood what it meant to establish himself and didn't need her granddaughter to say more. That Lu family is indeed powerful. However, on this matter, can my father admit defeat? If he retreats this time, next time, someone will dare to ride on our heads and shit on us. When Old Madam heard Qin Yining's unhurried analysis, the balance in her heart tilted a little. Qin Yining continued, "My father wants to be an official, so dignity is the most important thing. When the Lu family wants to make a move, they have to consider your Majesty's opinion. Madame Lu isn't from the main branch of the Lu family. She's a young lady from a side branch. Moreover, her style has always been open and insolent. She dares to threaten that we can't live here anymore. She doesn't have to wait for us to make a move. There will naturally be someone to deal with it. I definitely won't admit defeat and apologize to Madame Lu. My father still wants to be an official in the imperial court." Qin Yining explained patiently to Old Madam. He only hoped that she could understand and not make a decision on her own and drag down Qin Huayuan. Qin Yining felt that his face was secondary. The most important thing was the family's attitude. It was Madame Lu's fault. If the family Qin was willing to lower their heads, then wouldn't more people bully them in the future? At that time, would they have to give in one by one? It was better to make a scene with Madame Lu now and let people know that the Dian's faction of surrendering officials weren't all cowards. Qin Yining ignored Old Madam and quickly walked to the front yard. Unexpectedly, when he reached the door, Bing Tang came up and said in a low voice, "County Yan's Wangfei is here." County Yan's Wangfei, Li Yanyan. Old Madam was probably nervous for nothing. Qin Yining's angry and helpless mood instantly improved. He couldn't help but laugh. Lifting the curtain, he smelled the pleasant fragrance of tea when he entered the main hall. Li Yanyan was wearing a dark purple satin cloak. A guanine hood of the same color was on her head. It made her skin appear as white as snow and her lips appear even more lustrous. Qin Yining smiled and bowed, saying, "I didn't think that County Yan's Wangfei would come to my humble home. Your presence brings light to my humble home." Chapter 356. Qin Yining didn't rush her. She poured a cup of tea for Li Yanyan and then pushed the teacup to her hand. Li Yanyan smiled slightly at Qin Yining. "Your Majesty has bestowed a Junwang Fu. It is some distance away from your Fu. I just finished moving and wanted to come here for a stroll. After all, we are all Dian people. Even if we had some unhappiness in the past, we are all family now." Li Yanyan's expression was warm and gentle. It was the same easygoing appearance that Qin Yining had when he first met her on Mount Chongqun. Qin Yining was surprised but didn't show it on her face. She only smiled and said, "So your Majesty has already bestowed a Fu. I've been in the Fu all day and have become a frog in the well. I don't even know what's going on outside. I haven't congratulated Qiao Qian yet, but Wang Fei has come. I'm really ashamed." Li Yanyan saw that Qin Yining was so courteous and secretly sighed in relief. It seemed that she had thought too much. Qin Yining's "Your presence brings light to my humble dwelling" didn't have any sarcasm. Not at all. Now that we've come to Dezhou, everyone's situation is very difficult. Even if Miss Qin didn't say it, I can understand. Qin Yining only smiled warmly. Saying such heartfelt words all of a sudden was a little too much. Her relationship with Li Yanyan used to be a nodding acquaintance, but after Li Yanyan entered the palace, they became enemies. She knew that it was impossible for their relationship to become close all of a sudden. Li Yanyan saw that Qin Yining didn't say much and took the initiative to find a topic to chat about. They mostly talked about the prosperity of the capital in Dezhou or the new styles of fabric. They didn't talk about official matters. Qin Yining saw that Li Yanyan was beating around the bush and was actually a bit impatient. However, she was usually very patient and could keep her cool. Therefore, since Li Yanyan didn't say anything, she didn't ask. She just accompanied her and said a few words when the time was right. Li Yanyan's mouth was dry. She had already clearly revealed that she had something to discuss with him, but Qin Yining didn't even ask a single question. Li Yanyan felt very helpless. In the past, when she was in Dian, this trick was more than enough to deal with many older women. Why was it useless against a 16-year-old girl? Seeing that it was getting late, she couldn't stay any longer and could only whisper, "I have something to discuss with you." "Have you finally run out of patience?" Qin Yining raised his eyebrows and waved his hand at Ji Yun, who was serving behind him. Ji Yun and the others retreated. Li Yanyan's maidservant also retreated to the corridor, guarding the door to prevent people from approaching. Qin Yining smiled and said, "Princess consort, please speak your mind." Li Yanyan said, "Actually, I'm here today for an important matter in your life." "Oh." Qin Yining raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, "I didn't think that Wang Fei would like to be a matchmaker now." Was he mocking her? Li Yanyan suppressed the discomfort in her heart and said with a dignified smile, "I have nothing to do, and I'm not here for an outsider." Her gaze was gentle as she looked at Qin Yining and said, "While ago, Wang Yi and I heard about the grievances you suffered at the Prince Zhongshuanfu. Wang Yi really feels distressed for you, but right now, we have no choice. I know that Miss Qin is a person of noble character and will not be swayed by some gold, silver, and gold. So this time, I didn't bring those things to be a matchmaker. Based on our relationship, I won't beat around the bush. Today, I'm here for the matter between you and Wang Yi. Right now, Wang Yi only has Gu Chang and I by his side. The other Ce Fei and concubines have either died of illness or disappeared. Wang Yi truly likes you. As long as you nod, Wang Yi can immediately ask your majesty for an edict to make you a Ce Fei. Actually, I feel that it doesn't matter whether you are a Wang Fei or a Ce Fei. The most important thing is that Wang Yi truly loves you. I know that little sister Qin has suffered a lot outside. Now that you have such a good home and someone who truly loves you, it is a good thing." Qin Yining sat dignified and only listened to Li Yanyan gently. Li Yanyan could not immediately detect her likes and dislikes, and felt more and more uncertain. However, Li Yanyan had always felt that the county king of Yan was willing to give Qin Yining a place at his side and give her a stable home to live in. This was already a great favor. Was she still not satisfied? Ever since that day when Gu Chang deliberately instigated in front of Wang Yi, Li Yanyan could feel that Yu Qiyan seemed to like Qin Yining even more. Rather than let Yu Qiyan bring it up himself, or let that little wench Gu Chang steal the limelight, it was better for her, the principal wife, to think of it for him first. With her status as a Yu Qiyan, she could not stop more women from marrying into the family. It was easy for her to be a virtuous wife. Qin Yining lowered her long eyelashes when she heard this. She thought for a moment and then shook her head. "I appreciate Wang Fei's kindness. But perhaps you have some understanding of the matters of the imperial court. I am no longer the young lady of a noble family. My father is an official in the imperial court. There are many things that he cannot do as he wishes. As a member of the family Qin family, it is the same for me." Li Yanyan was a little confused by Qin Yining's words. She did not understand what Qin Yining meant, but the meaning of rejection was clear. Qin Yining would definitely refuse to marry her into the family. At this moment, Li Yanyan actually let out a sigh of relief. After all, Gu Chang's hypocrisy had already made her feel inferior. If another Qin Yining came to the royal prince's mansion, then she was afraid that she would lose her position as the princess consort of the county prince of Yen sooner or later. Younger sister Qin, don't be in such a hurry to decline. Li Yanyan sighed. Although Dezhou is good, it is still different from where we come from. The men here are all strong and powerful, but they lack some gentleness and delicacy. Younger sister, why don't you reconsider? Qin Yining smiled slightly and said, Wang Fei, you don't need to persuade me anymore. Actually, my intentions are already very clear. I will not marry into the imperial family. Even if the county prince of Yen was once part of the imperial family, I will not agree to marry him. When she heard Qin Yining say this, Li Yanyan was inwardly very happy. If Qin Yining said that she would not marry him, then she would have a future to strive for and hope for. If Qin Yining helped her a little more verbally, Li Yanyan was certain that her future with the county prince of Yen would be like a pair of lovebirds. However, Li Yanyan also knew that Qin Yining would not say good things about her in front of the county prince of Yen for no reason. Forget it. Li Yanyan had already said what she wanted to say. The county prince of Yen had hinted for her to be the matchmaker, and she had done as she was told. The success or failure of this matter was no longer within her scope of consideration. Li Yanyan stood up and nodded. Younger sister Qin, think about it carefully. Who knows, maybe the next time Wang Yi will come looking for you. After she said this, she covered her mouth and laughed. Qin Yining smiled slightly and called for Bing Tang and Ji Yun to help Li Yanyan out. Li Yanyan did not forget to remind Qin Yining even after she had boarded the carriage. Right now, the household is struggling to make ends meet. If younger sister is willing to stay by the county prince of Yan's side, you will be able to save a lot of food and other necessities. Chapter 357. Miss, I think that County Wang Fei of Yen has crossed her bottom line. Bing Tang came forward to support Qin Yining's arm. He said in a low voice, it seems that she does not get along well with Gu Shi and the Wang Fu. Ji Yun also said, County Wang Fei of Yen cares a lot about his wives and concubines. How is he caring about his wives and concubines? I think that he can't forget our Mississippi, Bing Tang joked with a smile. If Wang Yi knows of this, I don't know how angry he will be. Qin Yining couldn't help but laugh when he thought of how Pang Xiao might behave. He had not realized it before, but the more time he spent with her, the more he could see that Pang Xiao was a jealous person. He was a domineering person outside, but he would become petty when it came to her matters. This contrast was very interesting. Qin Yining shook his head with a smile and turned to return to the Fu. But just as Bing Tang said, after dinner, Qin Yining was leaning against a light blue satin pillow on the heated Kong by the window and reading a novel with the light of the lamp when a soft sound came from the back window of the cleaning room. Xian Yun and Ji Yun were doing needlework and exchanged a look when they heard the sound. Xian Yun stood in front of Qin Yining while Ji Yun quietly went back to check the situation. She carefully moved to the door and heard Pang Xiao's voice from inside. It's me. Ji Yun stilled and hurriedly lifted the curtain to confirm. Seeing that it was Pang Xiao, she sighed in relief and said with a smile, Wang Yi. Where is your miss? Miss is reading. Ji Yun bowed and led Pang Xiao in. Qin Yining had put down the novel and was taking off his shoes. Pang Xiao looked inside the room and confirmed that there were no outsiders. Then he waved his hand at Xian Yun and Ji Yun. The two maidservants glanced at each other, snickering as they bowed and retreated. Pang Xiao blew out the lights before helping Qin Yining to sit down. He bent over and held her feet in white socks. He frowned and said, Why are your feet so cold? Don't come down and warm yourself up. Qin Yining smiled and said, I don't think it'll be easy for me to get used to the weather here. She lifted the thin blanket and was about to cover herself when she saw Pang Xiao take off his boots and get on the Kong bed. He sat cross-legged opposite her and grabbed her feet with his big hands and put them into his arms. Sigh. What are you doing? Let go. Stepping on Pang Xiao's warm and firm abdomen, Qin Yining's face turned red. His toes curled up, and he quickly withdrew his leg. However, Pang Xiao didn't allow her to refuse. He held her ankles, lifted his clothes, and placed her cold feet on his stomach. He even wrapped his arms around her legs to prevent her from moving away. How is it? Is it warm? Pang Xiao moved closer to her and chuckled. Qin Yining glared at him with a red face, but her struggling weakened. His body was like a small stove. It was very warm in his arms. His abdomen muscles felt particularly good, like a hard iron block wrapped in a thick layer of velvet. Thinking about where she was stepping, Qin Yining only curled her toes and didn't dare to make any unnecessary movements. Not only was her face red, but even her ears and neck were red. Fortunately, in order to prevent people from outside from seeing the shadows in the room, they had already blown out the lights. Otherwise, if people saw her like this, it wouldn't be enough to embarrass her. Pang Xiao was in a good mood. He chuckled and said in a low voice, "After the matter with Madame Lu, your family didn't make trouble for you, right?" He lowered his voice and moved closer to her. It was obvious that he was afraid that someone would discover him. Qin Yining thought about the size of the manor and the fact that she wasn't the only one living in the backyard. She couldn't help but become cautious and whispered, "It's fine. The people of the Lu family said that I was nervous. It's normal for people to be nervous." When she lowered her voice was different from usual. There was a hint of laziness and tenderness in it, which made Pang Xiao's ears itch when he heard it. His voice also became a bit hoarse. "If you have any difficulties, don't hide them from me. Just tell me. If your family can't solve it, you still have me." Qin Yining couldn't help but chuckle softly. "I know you will support me, but the matter isn't that serious. Moreover, the Lu family has a deep foundation. Presumably, when you cooperated with them to attack Beiji, you had a lot of disputes, right? I know that with your ability, you don't need to be afraid of anyone. But you should be careful about things that aren't necessary. Don't get into trouble for no reason." When Pang Xiao heard Qin Yining's words of concern, he didn't feel disappointed because his ability was doubted. Instead, he felt comfortable from the bottom of his heart. It was like drinking a bowl of steaming meat soup in the cold winter. It warmed him from the inside out. Qin Yining should like him very much now, right? In the beginning, it was he who shamelessly tried to get closer to Qin Yining. He had spilled blood and climbed over walls. When he thought about the stupid things he did to pursue Qin Yining, he realized that he had never done anything for anyone since he was a child. Now, everything had a good result. Qin Yining was loyal to him. Pang Xiao felt that all his efforts were fruitful. At least, only when he was strong could he stand up for his wife, right? Pang Xiao rubbed her calf with his big hand and couldn't help smiling. He began to feel grateful to Mr. Zhang, who had found him. If Li Qitian hadn't forced him to go to the battlefield with the Pang family's banner, he might have died in the war or become a tavern shopkeeper. The only thing he was sure of was that he wouldn't have met Qin Yining if that was the case. If this person didn't exist in his life, how boring would it be? His large hand followed her calf and reached into his lapel, his palm covering her foot. He sighed and said, "When I first saw you, you were still so small. You were chased out of the medicine store and fell to the ground. The things in the basket spilled all over the ground. That scene really made my heart ache. I thought you would cry, but you didn't. Instead, you wiped your face and went to buy meat buns." Qin Yining was stunned. He suddenly looked up at Pang Xiao. what did you say? Pang Xiao looked at her gently. I was just found by Mr. Jing not long ago. I happened to hear Mr. Jing talk about the child they stole from the family Qin. After asking, I found out that Mr. Jing had swapped you with another girl for revenge. He even threw you away. I've always believed that misfortune shouldn't involve family members. Why should the next generation be implicated for what happened to the previous generation? That's why I begged Mr. Jing for a long time before I came to Liang City and saw you. However, my position in the army was low and I was under Mr. Zhang's control. I didn't have much money left for you. Sister Yi, I'm sorry. I let you suffer on the mountain for so many years. The money I left for you was limited. It shouldn't have been enough for you to last long, right? When I went to Liang City the next year, I couldn't find you. I asked around and they all said that your foster mother was dead. You disappeared without a trace. I was really sad for a long time. If it wasn't for General Qing, you would have been living in the family Qin as a rich young lady. Why did you have to live such a hard life? You are. Qin Yining's lips trembled. He grabbed Pang Zhao's clothes and whispered in a choked voice, you are that beautiful brother. Chapter 358. A 7 or 8-year-old little girl looked up at him with her big eyes and called him beautiful brother. At that time, he only felt his heart soften because the little girl was too cute. Now, Pang Xiao also felt his heart soften. Because this beautiful brother really softened his bones. He always felt that he had inexhaustible strength, but now he felt that he might not even have the ability to lift his arms. Only the feeling of softness all over his body occupied his senses. Our Pang family is sorry for what happened back then. After a long time, Pang Xiao slowly said these words. Qin Yining's mind was in a mess at this time, but her tears seemed to have their own ideas. They refused to listen to her control and kept flowing out. She was not a weak person and rarely shed tears. Today, she didn't know what was wrong with her. When she heard that it was the former subordinates of Pang Zhao's father who did it, she felt inexplicably wronged. Perhaps it didn't matter who did it, she wouldn't care. Only Pang Xiao, because she entrusted too many feelings to him, would have such high expectations of him. She didn't resent him, she just felt wronged. Seeing that Qin Yining didn't answer for a long time, Pang Xiao could faintly hear her sobbing in the quiet room. He touched her face with his big hand and felt that his hand was wet. He suddenly panicked. Sister Yi, don't cry. It's my fault. It's my fault. Pang Xiao went forward with heartache and hugged Qin Yining in his arms. I'm sorry. If I had known earlier, if I had taken time to see you more often, you wouldn't have suffered so much. Qin Yining shook her head and sobbed. It's not your fault. If you hadn't given me more than 10 taels of silver, I wouldn't have been able to treat my foster mother's illness. Later, I might have been sold. You've helped me a lot. You've given me enough money to show filial piety to my adoptive mother and send her off. When he heard that she almost had to sell herself to pay back the money back then, Pang Zhao's heart felt like it was being cut by a knife. He tightened his arms and shook her, saying, if I really hurt you to that point, I really deserve to die. You don't know, but this matter has always been a knot in my heart. Before I could participate in your life, it was because of my father that you suffered so much. I feel that I've let you down. But in the early years, my status in the army was not stable. I didn't have my own power and connections, so I had to look at other people's faces when I wanted to do anything. It was only in the past 2 years that I gained my own power and could do what I wanted to do. So you took advantage of the attack on Dian to go to the capital? Qin Yining recalled the scene when he first met this person at the Fairy Lady Temple. He sat up straight and said, Fairy Lady Lu was your subordinate back then. She wasn't really my subordinate. We had some interactions a long time ago. The people who stole me out of the family chain were not arranged by you. You really don't have to suffer too much because of this. But I still feel uneasy. Pang Xiao held her in his arms again and sighed deeply. Qin Yining breathed in his fresh masculine breath and felt that time was really strange. Maybe this is cause and effect. Because of the hostility between Beiji and Dian, my father tried to drive a wedge between the two families, the hatred between the two families, and the actions of Mr. Zhang and the others. If they didn't steal me out of the family chain, how could you notice me? Naturally, we wouldn't have met in Liang City, and all the things that happened later wouldn't have happened. Thinking about it carefully, if she really became strangers with Pang Xiao, her heart would be hollowed out by someone. She would feel anxious and inexplicably sad. Pang Xiao felt the same way. If Xing Pei hadn't done such extreme things, if he hadn't been taught by his grandparents and had a completely different worldview from Xing Pei, he wouldn't have felt guilty about the daughter of the family Qin, let alone pay attention to her. If Qin Yining had grown up by Qin Huaiyuan's side and enjoyed all the glory and splendor and was no different from an ordinary girl, then to him, she was really just the daughter of his enemy. Both of them had the same size in their hearts. Their arms hugged each other even tighter. Sister Yi. Yes. Pang Xiao kissed her forehead and said with a smile, the moon is so beautiful tonight. Qin Yining looked around in shock. It was pitch black inside the room. It was cold and the windows were not open. How could Pang Xiao see the moon was beautiful? Her straightforward actions and silent criticism were written all over her face. Pang Xiao almost laughed out loud. Qin Yining felt helpless when he saw his chest rise and fall in stifled laughter. The two looked at each other and then at each other and laughed foolishly for no reason. After a long while, Pang Xiao said in a low voice, I have something to ask you. What is it? Qin Yining's voice was amused. Pang Xiao said, why did County Wang Fei come to find you? Qin Yining felt speechless. How did you know that County Wang Fei came to find me? If you had ordered someone to stay by my side and report back to you, shouldn't you know the purpose of her visit? Why are you asking me in person now? Qin Yining's tone was very calm and there was an amused smile on his face. However, there was no light in the room and Pang Xiao could not see his expression. He thought that he was angry and hurriedly explained, my subordinates were watching the movements in County Wang Fu so they saw County Wang Fei come in and out. As to your side, I will only arrange for people to protect you. I will not watch you. You are not a criminal. Why should I restrict your freedom? Qin Yining was amused by his nervous appearance and laughed. Pang Xiao finally reacted. He hugged her in amusement and anger. All right, don't laugh. Tell me why she came to find you. Qin Yining said, she is puffing herself up at her own cost. Qin Yining described Li Yinyan's arrival in detail. In the end, he said, that is why it is said that a woman's life is tiring. She clearly does not like it, but for the sake of her reputation as a good wife and mother, she has to pretend to be magnanimous. There are things that she cannot say, grievances that she cannot tell. She puts on an act in front of outsiders and secretly cries when she is home. Hearing her sigh, Pang Xiao hurriedly promised, I am not that kind of man. I will not make things difficult for you. Qin Yining glared at him and said, don't say it so early. There are still 10 great beauties in your family. I did not go to find them of my own accord. But they were given to you by the emperor. They are your legitimate concubines. They are people who can carry on the family line for you. Qin Yining's tone was slightly urgent. He realized that his words were inappropriate. It was common for a man to have many concubines. Even his father had taken in a few concubines in the past for the sake of having children. Those men with power and influence had attained a certain position in the government. Even if he did not look for them himself, there were many colleagues and subordinates who would send beautiful women to him. He could not refuse such an occasion, so he could only accept them. Not to mention the beautiful concubines sent over, he could also casually take in the maidservants in the study and bedroom of the man with power and influence. If a maidservant could become the man's concubine, she would be more dignified than ordinary maidservants. In the future, once she gave birth to a son or a daughter, she would be able to openly become a concubine. That would be half a master. Qin Yining understood these realities. Moreover, every woman had to watch her husband sleep with concubines, socialize outside, and drink wine with prostitutes. She had to hide all her sadness in her heart. This was a process that every woman had to go through. However, when she thought about how Pang Xiao would one day transfer his gentleness to someone else, she still felt a bit disappointed. "Miss." The door was pushed open with a creak. Xian Yun quickly walked in. Qin Yining returned to his senses and hurriedly pushed Pang Xiao aside to look at the door. "You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure."